All right, now we'd like to join CNN USA for coverage of the landing of Space Shuttle Columbia. Let's watch that.
A conversation on the line here with our friends in Houston. If the control room could dial them up and we could have a conversation with them. Obviously some troubling news here about the Space Shuttle Columbia, as we haven't heard from it yet. The time of landing was supposed to be right about at this moment. Space Shuttle is commanded by Rick Husband, 7-person crew on board, and we have a spectacular shot, by the way, of the Space Shuttle as it went over Dallas. I wonder if we can show that tape.
This is Mission Control Houston.
Hang on, let's listen in to James Hartsfield.
Instructing controllers to follow contingency procedures. The last communications with the Shuttle Columbia during its descent from orbit were at about 8 a.m. Central Time as it was descending through the atmosphere.
Okay, that's James
at an
Hartsfield.
altitude of about 207,000 feet, en route to the Kennedy Space Center, Florida, and a touchdown that was anticipated to occur about 2.5 minutes ago. Flight controllers received no further communications with the spacecraft after about 8 a.m. Central Time, and no further tracking data from the spacecraft was gained from C-band tracking radar at the Merritt Island tracking station in Florida.
This was the 28th mission of the Space Shuttle Columbia, commanded by Rick Husband. And 7-person crew.
Contingency procedures in effect in mission control require all operators to conserve all their data and log books and notes that have been taken, that being instructed by Flight Director Leroy Kane, for controllers to begin following those steps and secure all information.
All right, this is very ominous type of talk coming from James Hartsfield, the public affairs officer there in Houston. Almost precisely the same language we heard subsequent to the Challenger explosion 17 years ago this past week. Preserving data, the instructions coming from the flight director there in Houston as they try to determine what has become of the Space Shuttle Columbia on what was up till this point. And we do have pictures, I'm told, of it passing over Dallas, Texas, what was a routine entry, the entry of a space shuttle into the Earth. Let's listen to James.
Flight Director Leroy Kane has declared a contingency. Flight controllers here in Mission Control are securing all their information, notes, and data gathered from the spacecraft. The last communications with Columbia at 8 a.m. Central Time as it was descending toward Florida for its landing. At that time, about 207,000 feet above central Texas, traveling approximately 12,500 miles per hour. 1,192 miles from its touchdown at Kennedy Space Center.
Now, as you know, a brief loss of communication is part of the standard operating procedure.
8 a.m., no communications were received with Columbia and no tracking data received through the Merritt Island tracking station. Those efforts made, the Flight Dynamics Officer reports no objects tracked through that tracking data.
Okay, we are now at approximately 9:20 Eastern Time. Landing was scheduled for 9:16 Eastern Time, and there are some fairly hard and fast rules about space shuttles and landings. And that is, once you start a landing and it begins over the Indian Ocean with the so-called deorbit burn, you can pretty much set your watch to them. The orbiter is a very heavy, very intricate glider, doesn't come in under power, and once that deorbit burn begins, the landing time is preordained. Let's get our freelance stringer on the line from Florida, Phil Chen. Phil, what can you tell us?
Well, Miles, we don't know here much more than what you know. About 9 a.m. Eastern, we lost communications with the shuttle. The crew's very well trained. If they lose communications with the ground, they can proceed on their own, go through all the procedures. However, when the shuttle was coming above the horizon, the Capcom in Houston, Charlie Holbach, kept on calling the shuttle on the UHF. There's a totally separate radio from other systems in the shuttle, and he could not get any contact. Even if that radio was out, it would have still been tracked by the ground-based radars, which it was not. And in addition, of course, we would have heard the sonic booms, which we did not. So obviously, something happened.
Phil, can you tell us where that occurred? Where in the world that communication loss occurred?
Roughly 9 a.m., the shuttle would have been traveling over Texas around the same time as you saw the video from Dallas earlier today.
All right, stand by, Phil. Let's get Kyle Herring on the line. He's Public Affairs Officer from Houston, NASA. Kyle, what do we know?
Well, Miles, at this point, we know we lost communication somewhere around 9 o'clock Eastern Time. That would have placed on the tracking. The shuttle would have been over the northeast portions of Texas, tracking toward, right on its ground track toward the Florida landing, of course.
All right. So what is part of the contingency procedures, Kyle? What is going on right now at Mission Control?
Well, Mission Control, I mean, it's a very detailed plan, obviously, but first things to do is to pull out a contingency plan and start following that. The flight dynamics team obviously continues to try to make contact with its counterparts to see if they had seen anything. Obviously it's a very methodical approach and a very business-like approach, even in a contingency situation.
Now, we're told that this communication loss occurred somewhere over Texas. Are you, as part of that contingency plan, are they calling local authorities for any sort of search and rescue?
I do not know if that's part of the contingency plan, but it would not be, I would assume that something like that would be taking place, yes. The only additional information that I have is around that time we did, some of the flight controllers did report that some of the sensor data was lost, so on some of the hydraulic systems and on the shuttle, and that was the only additional information that we had prior to the loss of communication.
The key thing here is the shuttle operates on hydraulics as it comes in, and the key thing to look at here are the auxiliary power units, as you well know, which power those hydraulics. Do we have any indication, Kyle, that there was any sort of failure or problem with those auxiliary power units as they were fired up ready for the descent?
No, we didn't have any indication of that. Like I said, the only indications we had is we lost some sensor data on some of the hydraulic systems that would indicate like tire pressure, those kind of things. So when you lost that sensor data, it was not too shortly after that, I guess, that we lost the communications link. So at that point, we didn't have any data to show any other like APU, auxiliary power unit data, those kind of things. So at that point, we just had a total loss of communication.
Kyle, I suspect you're near CNN where you are. Let's take a look at this picture that we got from one of our affiliates as the shuttle streaked over, I believe, the Dallas, Texas area. I don't know that there's anything that you or I could discern from looking at that shot, except that I see multiple trails there, multiple trails. Reminds me a little bit of when Mir went down. What does that tell you?
Well, obviously, you know, it'd be sheer speculation until we had confirmation, Miles, about that. Obviously, multiple targets is not something that you want to see. You know, I'd be foolish to tell you that that wasn't something that looked pretty bad. We always hope for the best, and we're just following the contingency plans that we can at this point, and trying to make any contact with folks that might be able to help us with this.
Kyle, where does it go from here then?
Well, we're just going to continue to try to contact the folks that can help us, find out what happened, and make any additional procedures, follow any procedures that are necessary at this point under a contingency.
All right, Kyle Herring, I'll let you get back to work. Phil Chen, I don't know if you're near a CNN monitor, but let's play that tape one more time. This is a very telling piece of videotape, and I'm hopeful that we can run this through the telestrator D in the control room. Phil Chen, can you see the video where you are? Can you see CNN?
Unfortunately not. We're in the bus going back to press.
Here's what we're seeing that is a very, very significant and what you should look at. Multiple trails, multiple indication of multiple targets there as the space shuttle streaked over Dallas, Texas. I think that once it doesn't take a lot of elaboration to tell you what multiple trails and multiple targets would indicate. Phil, anything to add on that?
Just that there's no doubt that we've had a bad day. You just can't lose communications with the shuttle. As you said before, everything's like clockwork with landing. It should have come across, even if all communications were close to the shuttle, it should have come up on the radars, the ones that came over the Florida horizon.
All right, Phil, let's do this. If we could run through the scenarios here. That we got an indication. I don't know if you could hear Kyle Herring, but he was talking about some problems with the hydraulics that might have been indicated on some of the sensors there right before communication was lost. The shuttle is coming in without power. Auxiliary power units are actually controlling the power, generating power on them. Those auxiliary power units use a substance called hydrazine, among other things, to operate. What are the other areas that would be high on the list of things to look at as the shuttle is coming in?
Well, there's two auxiliary power units, as you said. They operated flawlessly on launch. They used one of them to check out the shuttle the day before for landing. They turn on all three during landing today. And those are used to operate the wings and elevons, basically the same as on an airplane. They help control the shuttle during landing. Obviously, if there was a major disaster on one of those, it would be a bad day. The shuttle is an electrically operated vehicle. It uses 3 fuel cells for power. It's not likely that all 3 could have failed, but that would certainly be a possibility.
All right.
There's no doubt something happened.
As we look at the very distinct and obvious signature of multiple targets, as is the term for NASA, meaning pieces, what are the scenarios that we'd be looking at?
I hate to say that, but the only obvious thing I could think of is some kind of a major.
All right, we're losing Phil Chan, and hopefully we'll get his cell phone signal back. But what is important to note here is that as the shuttle comes in, it is really begins a process somewhere over the Indian Ocean of slowing down from a speed of 17,500 miles an hour all the way to the landing. The runway at the shuttle landing facility at the Kennedy Space Center. And as it comes in, it's a process of steep banks in a very nose-high attitude that shuttles endure in order to slow it down from its orbital speed, 17,500 miles an hour, ultimately to 0. Fair amount of stress put on a vehicle in the course of that, as you might suspect, as it goes through that tremendous braking procedure. Now, we're talking about something that is moving at a speed Mach 25, 25 times the speed of sound, 6 or 7 times faster than a rifle bullet. And that particular structure endures a tremendous amount of stress. Let's get Kyle Herring back on the line. Kyle Herring is Public Affairs Officer for NASA in Houston. Kyle, what can you tell us?
Nothing new, Miles, that I can report to you at this point. You know, still maintaining the same posture that we were in just moments ago. So there's really nothing new at this point that I can pass on to you.
All right. Give us a sense, Kyle, with your familiarity of this, as a shuttle comes in for re-entry, the sorts of stresses. As we look at this tape one more time from our affiliate WFAA, streaking across Dallas, you see what looks like a streaking comet, a meteor. And then all of a sudden, right at that point, I don't know if you saw it, right as it hit that, went behind that pole, multiple targets there, multiple streaks. Give us a sense of the kind of stress it would be enduring at that point, Kyle, going about 14,000 miles an hour or so.
Well, just based on my experience with a shuttle reentry, you're usually somewhere around 250, 300,000 feet in altitude at that point. So you're back in the Earth's atmosphere. That reentry into the atmosphere really occurs about 400,000 feet, and that's typically out over the Pacific Ocean. Then the shuttle, basically, it's high-speed reentry. At that point, you're probably going somewhere around 6 times, 7 times the speed of sound, maybe. And there's a series of high-speed bank turns that are made by the computers to slow the vehicle down. Basically put the underside of the orbiter into the direction of travel to slow it down.
Kyle, watch this tape with me. WFAA gave this to us. And look, right at that point, significant difference right there. Don't you agree?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's definitely something that occurred that we obviously at this point don't know what that is that caused this.
And then we're talking about stuff that we have here exclusively as we watch this. Very distinct. And do you recall seeing the mirror reentry, Kyle? It's very reminiscent of that.
Yes, it's very similar to what would occur with a targeted reentry of something that was like a progress vehicle that we send away from the station to burn up in the atmosphere. Mirrors reentry, Skylabs, and anything like that. Yes.
All right, let's talk for a moment about the contingencies which the crew trains for ad nauseum in Houston, which is bailout. What would be a scenario if something was going wrong at this point? What are the options for the crew for getting out if they need to?
Well, I'm afraid, Miles, that there is not really an option at this altitude. The bailout procedures that are in place for a shuttle, either during after a engine problem on launch or on reentry, are bailout procedures that would take place or be in effect below about 20 to 30,000 feet or so. So much lower than what you're seeing here.
And you're saying we're talking 200,000 feet at least there, about 6 times the speed of sound. But what we're also talking about here, Kyle, when you look at all the forces and stresses on a space shuttle from launch all the way to landing, you know, we talk about max Q on liftoff, when the maximum dynamic pressure on the shuttle. When does it encounter the most stress? Launch, landing? Is this the period right here that we're seeing this tape?
Well, launch is probably among the most stressful during that max Q period, because that's when there's the most aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle in that altitude range on the way uphill. Typically, there's not a max Q, if you will, on the way down. There are stresses on the order of about maybe 2 Gs or so when you're making the big wide sweeping turn approaching the runway. But at this point, there aren't any stresses in terms of G-forces that you're really feeling, because you're still pretty high up in the upper reaches of the atmosphere. So it's not very thick, if you will, at that altitude.
All right, we should tell you, Kyle, that while you were talking, we're receiving some calls from viewers. Palestine, Texas is the date line. We're about 100 miles south of Dallas, I'm told, and there are reports there of a loud impact. Let's leave that at that for just a moment. Kyle, if you could stand by. Phil Chen, just could you describe, you're right there at the shuttle landing facility, describe the scene for me, please? I guess we've lost Phil Chen. I should point out the crew. The commander, Rick Husband, the pilot, Willie McCool, Mission Specialist 1, David Brown, Mission Specialist 2, Kalpana Chawla, Michael Anderson, Mission Specialist 3, Laurel B. Clark, Mission Specialist 4, and the payload specialist, the first Israeli ever to fly in space on this 16-day mission, Ilan Ramon, at the tail end of what was a relatively flawless mission, scientific mission, 16 days in orbit. What we're seeing here is very ominous indeed. These are pictures which tell the story. That is clearly the shuttle breaking up as it passes south of Texas, Dallas, Texas, near Palestine, as it was coming in. Communication was lost about 15 minutes prior to its anticipated landing at the Kennedy Space Center at 9:16 a.m. Eastern local time. Kyle Herring, search and rescue forces in motion yet? Can you confirm that? We've lost Kyle Herring. We can only presume that those same calls that we are getting here are being received with the authorities. And we're joined by a veteran space shuttle astronaut, a man who spent several months on the space station Mir, a man who has experience before and after the Challenger disaster with NASA and the shuttle. Norm Thagard, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Miles. Good to talk with you.
Norm, can you see these pictures? Are you watching CNN?
Well, I could bring it up, but I'm in fact, upstairs where I don't have a TV. If we get a break, I can go to the TV.
Well, Norm, as you well know, because you were with me that night, it's practically a carbon copy of the picture we saw from the South Pacific when the space shuttle Mir came down. Multiple targets, multiple trails behind those targets. Where does that leave the experts now, the engineers? What do they do?
It almost certainly, I would think, Miles, means that the shuttle broke up. It is an electronically controlled vehicle, and if it, for some reason, loses control at those speeds, it's going to be a bad situation.
Let's back up and talk about what could cause a space shuttle to break up at this juncture in its flight. We've been talking a little bit about how it's hydraulically controlled. We know what hydraulics are, obviously, but the shuttle doesn't have any operative engines as it comes in. So they fire up what are called auxiliary power units, run on hydrazine, which power those hydraulics. And those are kind of, well, those machines are something you have to really be careful about, right, Norm?
They run at very high speeds, I think something like 80,000 RPM, and it is possible for, I guess, one to fly apart. However, there are 3 of them, and you can certainly operate with the loss of one. And some of the rockets are used right down to almost the last, just as the shuttle starts to go subsonic. So some of the steering rockets or attitude rockets continue to fire even down close to ground.
Okay, so those steering rockets, how much would they be? They would be used at this juncture then? We're talking about the rockets that are typically used on orbit to maneuver the shuttle. They would be used in the higher altitudes where there's less air passing over the aerodynamic surfaces of the shuttle, correct?
That's correct, and as the shuttle gets lower and lower, I think various of those rockets start to be deselected, and then finally, before the shuttle or right around the time it goes subsonic, none of the rockets are being used anymore.
I see. Let's go through what they call in NASA and what they will undoubtedly begin even as we speak, as they preserve their data, that rather ominous statement coming out of Mission Control, which you will recall, of course, from the Challenger days, the fault tree, where they try to figure out what are they going to be looking at, try to help us prioritize how they would try to sift through this, what's happened here.
I would assume that they all had data up until some moment, and there are various systems in which the failure could have occurred. It could have been in the control system. It could have been a failure in the hydraulics, as you mentioned. So they'll have the experts in the various areas looking at their data to see if they can figure out what happened when.
Norm, you were involved in Challenger and the investigation, were you not?
I played some role in that. I was not on the board that looked at it, but I think most of us in the astronaut office wound up playing some role, and among other things, I was the casualty assistance officer for the Scobie family.
I see. Give me, as we harken back to that as the template for what goes on now, first of all, the first concern is the crew, clearly. Search and rescue possibilities, chances of survivability. Let's run through that. Norm? Have we lost Norm? Norm Thagard? All right, we've lost Norm Thagard. I apologize for that. We'll try to get him back. All right, it'd be nice if we could, if I could prevail upon the control room to bring up some of the pictures of the crew at some point on at least on the computer. And we're working on that right now, and we'll get that for you in just a minute. 7-person crew led by Rick Husband on his second flight. Willie McCool, his first, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Michael Anderson, Laurel Clark, and Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli to fly in space. And what we've been seeing, courtesy of WFAA, our affiliate in Dallas, is the unmistakable signs of a vehicle breaking up at an altitude of about 200,000 feet. Let's listen to James Hartsfield, Mission Control Houston, for a minute, if we can.
The space shuttle has disintegrated.
Leo, while we've been talking to you, we have been able to source some of those pictures that you yourself have been mentioning. We're seeing pictures here. They are not live, but they are pictures that we understand are of what you have been describing, debris falling from the sky that must indeed corroborate what you were saying, that the Space Shuttle Columbia has been lost. Of course, very early days, Leo, but given that we have a fair idea of where the shuttle was when things went wrong, what sorts of problems might the shuttle have encountered?
Well, it's impossible to speculate, but obviously the presence of an Israeli Air Force pilot aboard the shuttle will have prompted speculation about a terrorist attack, and I mention that only so that I can categorically say that the altitude at which this happened precludes that completely. I think I can say that with absolute certainty. So I just wanted initially to make that point. Secondly, The disintegration of such a large vehicle above a populated area of the United States is a matter of grave concern. And I think we'll be watching now for the first reports of where this material has impacted. Some of the objects that hit the ground will be very large indeed.
Leo,
Yes?
I'm going to stop you there because your phone line has become almost inaudible for us here in the studio. We'll sort that out and we'll get back to you as soon as we've ironed out the technical problem because we still want to keep talking to you. But
Barbara Starr with us at the Pentagon or in Washington anyhow. Barbara, what do you have for us?
Miles, we can now tell you that the Bush administration is about to convene what they call a domestic event conference. This will be an interagency conference between all domestic and military agencies that will be involved in the next step, whatever that may be. We can tell you we've spoken to some Pentagon officials this morning. There is a lot of distress about this situation. They are about to, as we say, to convene a domestic event conference. This is what happens in the federal government when there is a serious domestic event in the country. We can also tell you that there would be every expectation as events unfold here that the North American Aerospace Defense Command in Colorado and the U.S. Strategic Command in Omaha, Nebraska will be involved in whatever the next step is, trying to reconstruct through their satellite and communication systems what may have happened here, working with NASA on that. Events appear to be moving very rapidly, but we are told that this conference is about to take place shortly, and they will begin planning for whatever the next step may be. Miles?
All right. We will be watching that. Barbara, keep us posted on that. Does that occur in the Situation Room at the White House?
Well, these things typically, being interagency, occur across Washington. We expect it to be partially in the Situation Room, in the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, and in other key government agencies. They are capable of conducting these conferences not only by secure telephone, but by secure video phone. And
Barbara, I'm going to have you pause for a minute. Let's listen to James Hartfield for 1 minute. Listen.
As communications was lost with the Space Shuttle Columbia during its descent from orbit en route to a landing at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the last communications with Columbia occurred at about 8 a.m. Central Time as it was above the north central Texas area at an altitude of approximately 200,000 feet. Any debris that is located in the vicinity of the north central Texas area that may be related to the shuttle contingency should be reported to local law enforcement, who will then report to NASA. It should be avoided. Debris could be potentially hazardous due to toxic substances that are used as propellants on the space shuttle. Flight controllers here are securing all information and notes and data pertinent to the scheduled descent and landing of the shuttle today.
What's his name again?
As part of contingency procedures. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth area have been alerted.
We are listening to James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer for NASA in Houston, and if you're just joining us...
Any debris that is located in the north central Texas vicinity that may be related to the space shuttle contingency should be reported to local law enforcement authorities and should be avoided as it may be hazardous due to toxic substances that are used as propellants for the space shuttle.
James Hartsfield in Houston, offering up a word of warning to those who might encounter debris from the Space Shuttle Columbia. And if you are just joining us, the picture you are seeing right now tells the story. 100 miles south of Dallas, Texas, at an altitude of 200,000 feet, the Space Shuttle Columbia, on its 28th mission, broke up in flight 6 times the speed of sound. Take a look at the crew just briefly, if you could. There's the commander, Rick Husband, Kaplana Chawla, pilot Willie McCool, Michael Anderson, Ilan Ramon of Israel, Laurel Clark, and finally, David Brown. 7 crew members on board the Space Shuttle Columbia. Let's go to a witness from Palestine, Texas. Bob Moulter, what did you hear? What did you see?
Well, approximately 8:09 this morning, the entire house started to shake. and living in close proximity to a railroad track, we thought and with chemicals traveling, I thought might have been an explosion. So I walked outside and immediately saw this spiral, long spiral in the air, and it was headed in a southeast direction from where we're at. And the rumbling continued. It was very intense for approximately 2 minutes, and then just stopped. And about that point, the trail disappeared down towards the sunrise.
Bob Moulter, I'm sorry, I've got a lot of things going on here, but you didn't see, you just heard things. Is that accurate to say?
No, we saw the spirals in the sky.
Spirals, okay.
There were spirals like a high-flying jet, except it wasn't in a straight line.
Right, and did you see multiple targets, if you will, pieces?
Yes, it was like a wide band that was moving, and I would say that, and of course it was difficult by looking up, but I would say within the spiral it was a wide wave as it was moving. It was not in a straight line.
Right. Now, did you have any sense of what was happening at that point?
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, I called my wife at work and asked her, did you hear and feel that? And she said, yes. I said, did you see it in the sky? She said, no. And she said, turn on the TV. So I turned on the local station. There was nothing there. Mm-hmm. So I immediately switched over to CNN, and within 1 minute, of course, you came up with the breaking news, and I realized what it was.
Now, what exactly did you hear, Mr. Moulter?
It would be a sound that would be very similar to a tornado, if you've ever experienced that. It's a very loud, intense roar, and it stays at a certain pitch. There was no variance in it whatsoever. And as I say, it was very loud, and it diminished as the trail continued further southeast. But it was loud enough, and it was low enough, because, as I say, this trail was extremely wide, that it shook the building completely, the house. And I would say that it shook the house for a good minute.
And how close do you think it landed to where you are?
It's difficult for me to say. As I say, it was headed southeast towards the horizon, and then I lost it into the sun.
Yeah. All right, Bob Moulter, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. Norm Thagard back with us, veteran shuttle astronaut, veteran of a long stay aboard the space station Mir. Norm, when last we spoke and we lost you, we were talking about using, Challenger as a template here as to what happens in the immediate aftermath of something like this. What's going on right now?
I'm sure there's some disbelief, but the pictures and all the circumstances tell you that you know what happened. And so everyone now is being professional at NASA. They'll be looking at their systems, all of the flight controllers, and they'll try and come up with the cause and go from there.
I imagine professionalism is put to the test in so many ways in a juncture like this.
Yeah, well, I think all the folks at NASA are professional no matter what, but you feel numb. I know I did, and I know I do now.
Yeah. It's easy to, for the layperson, to think about space shuttle missions as being routine. But anybody who knows a little something about this would tell you just the opposite, wouldn't they?
They would tell you that because rockets are rockets. Anybody that sits on top of a rocket knows there's a risk involved. And even on entry, although we don't think of that as being nearly as dangerous as ascent, it still has to go perfectly because you start out at 17,500 miles an hour and you pick up a little speed until you start slowing down in the atmosphere. So it has to work well.
Well, you mentioned that point because we've had conversations before where you've told me really the only part of the mission you sweat is the first 8.5 minutes, the rise to orbit. And after that, things, relatively speaking, are and given where you are relatively safe. The prospect of something happening on descent, on re-entry, how much did that weigh on your mind when you flew?
Not very much. Certainly you are mindful that the shuttle's got to be in the right attitude and the systems have to be working, but there's so much redundancy. And since you are not in a situation where you have very powerful rockets that can malfunction in a second and kill you, that's not the situation with entry.
Yeah. Norm, stay on the line, please, if you will. And by the way, are you near CNN? Are you seeing these pictures yet? Norm, are you still there?
I'm here, Miles. I'm watching it on TV.
Okay. What does that tell you when you see that?
It's breaking up.
Okay. Let's go to Jerry Lininger on the line. Jerry, I don't know if you're home in northern Michigan, but that's where Jerry's home is. Jerry is a shuttle veteran, also a Mir veteran, retired astronaut as well. Jerry, what are your thoughts as you look at this scene and what might be going on right now for NASA, for the professionals, for search and rescue?
Well, it's a horrible thing, and I'm sure they're just trying to put the parts together and try to reconstruct things so it never happens again. You got to get to the root of what happened there.
Yeah. We were just talking to Norm about this concept that the most dangerous period of time is the first 8.5 minutes of the mission, the point where the rockets are firing and all the things are exploding behind you. How many scenarios do the crews and their simulations run through on re-entry?
Yeah, just, I don't want to say infinite, but I mean you train and you train and you train. But I can tell you re-entry, the normal re-entry kind of sounds like a locomotive train coming up behind you. Very dynamic. You're inside a fireball. Plasma collapsing around you. It's like the worst turbulence you've ever been on in an airplane. So it is very dynamic, and if you lose your orientation in space and the tiles aren't pointing in the right direction, you get what you're seeing here today.
Mm-hmm. Jerry, let's listen to James Hartsfield for a minute out of Mission Control.
Pertinent to the descent of the Space Shuttle Columbia this morning from orbit. The last communications were received from the Space Shuttle Columbia at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time, as it was an altitude of about 200,000 feet above north central Texas, en route to a planned landing at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 8:16 a.m. Central Time. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth area have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency. Any debris that may be located in the Dallas-Fort Worth vicinity should be avoided and may be hazardous due to the toxic nature of propellants used on board the shuttle, and should be reported to local law enforcement authorities. To repeat, any debris that is located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area should be avoided, as it may be hazardous due to toxic substances used as propellant on board the space shuttle, and should be reported to local law enforcement authorities.
All right, with that...
This is Mission Control, Houston.
With that word of caveat from James Hartsfield, Mission Control, Houston. Jerry Lininger, what goes through, on the one hand, you're a technical person, you're an engineer, and I know that, well, you're a medical doctor as well, but you go through sort of the technicalities of this, but the other side of you is sort of, it takes your breath away, doesn't it? Jerry, you there?
Yes, I'm with you.
What are your thoughts?
Well, it's just a horrible thing. Nothing worse.
Yeah. I'm going to leave it at that for just a moment. Stay with us if you can. Ricky Lufkin is on the line with us. He's from about 100 miles south of Dallas, where we believe the debris of the Space Shuttle Columbia, oldest orbiter in NASA's fleet, the one that flew first in April of 1981 and flew its last mission, this time the 28th mission, clearly from this videotape from WFAA, breaking up into several pieces over southern Texas. Do we have Mr. Lufkin? I'm sorry, Ricky Calbert. Ricky Calbert, are you there?
Yes.
What did you see? What did you hear, sir?
Well, it was about 10 till 8 this morning, Central Time, our time, and my wife and I heard a rumble kind of building, and it eventually got to where our house was shaking. I got up and went to our back door to see if I could see anything. I didn't see anything. It lasted for maybe a minute and a half, and it slowly tapered off. So that's when I went into the living room and turned the TV on to see if I could find anything, to see if maybe they were reporting anything on the local news.
How'd you describe what you saw then?
No, I didn't.
Just all what you heard then?
Yeah, just what I heard.
Okay, and it was very distinct kind of rumble to it?
Oh, yeah. If you live, I mean, it's just like somebody else was saying. I don't know if they were talking about the way this sounded or not, but if you live close to a railroad track, I mean, extremely close, like your back door, that's what it sounded like, and that's what it felt like. My entire house was shaking, and it's not a small house.
Wow. Okay.
So,
All right.
I tried to call in as soon as I could. It took about an hour for me to find a number, but...
All right. Well, we appreciate your call and your insights for us. Let's get CNN's Jean Meserve with us. She covers Homeland Security for us. The sad truth is that in this day and age, and particularly with an Israeli on board, one of the things that is considered is the possibility of terrorism. Jean, that seems remote right now, but what exactly are your sources telling you?
Well, I've had a conversation with an administration official who says based on the information we have right now, it is, quote, highly unlikely that this was related to terrorism. This administration official noting, amongst other things, that the shuttle was, at the time of this apparent breakup, at a very, very high altitude, mentioned perhaps because there have been various things written and said about the possible vulnerability of aircraft to weaponry like shoulder-fired missiles, which might be in the hands of terrorists. The multi-agency investigation, of course, will be conducted, and its findings will be pored over by officials involved in Homeland Security and terrorism. But reiterating once again, this official saying it is premature for anyone to jump to any sort of conclusion that this might have been a terrorist event. Lyle?
Jean Meserve, thank you very much. And we should point out, and Jean, you can amplify on this if you want. I mean, for example, if you're running through these scenarios, and as long as we're in this area, let's run through them. You know, a surface-to-air missile, Stinger-type thing, would have a maximum range of maybe 10 or 15,000 feet. The space shuttle is traveling extremely fast, 6 times the speed of sound, at about 200,000 feet. And it's hard to imagine anything that would be of a terrorist nature that could be involved, correct?
Exactly the point, that this spacecraft was just at too high an altitude for anything of that sort apparently to have been a factor in what's happened here.
All right. Jean Meserve, thank you very much. Norm Thagard, are you still with us? All right. We're going to cue him up, and just want to recap for those of you who might just now be tuning in. You are looking at what is the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia on its 28th flight. First flew April of 1981. There you saw a very specific moment there where some added smoke came out of the trail there, that single trail. And then subsequent to that, as you look in here, you'll see it develops into multiple, let me try to clear that out for a second. It develops into multiple streams, multiple trails, like a series of comets. You see them breaking up there? You see those points there. Clearly, there was something that happened. It was almost like a puff of smoke that I saw. If we could we roll that back one more time, and I'll try to identify that point for you where we saw kind of a burst of smoke which was left behind as prior to that. And I think it was probably, well, you can see here quite clearly there's some pieces there. I think this might be after, oh, there it is, right there. See that smoke? See that there was a flash and then a puff of smoke. That was clearly some kind of explosion. Probably a secondary explosion, because what you saw first were those initial pieces that came off for a brief period of time, maybe 2-3 seconds, then a burst, and the smoke that went behind it, and then shortly thereafter, as you see, multiple pieces being tracked there very clearly in this shot. And as I say, it reminds me so much of seeing the Space Shuttle Mir as it came down to Earth, coming down in multiple pieces, streaking down that way. Even to a layperson, this is quite clearly a breakup of the vehicle. Norm Thagard, your thoughts? Is Norm there? Okay. Who do we have?
That because of weather conditions at Cape Canaveral, the space agency delayed and delayed and delayed telling the crew to fire their retro rockets. And it was, as I say, only 4 minutes before they were due to actually fire their engines that they were given a go from Houston. That is unusual.
Leo, can I stop you for a moment there while we welcome viewers from around the world and bring them up to date with the events that have unfolded if they haven't been watching already? That is to tell you that it seems almost certain now that the Space Shuttle Columbia, which was due to land at Cape Canaveral in Florida just under an hour ago, has disintegrated on re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. We have no official reports of fatalities as yet, but we do have pictures of debris and warnings from NASA that there is debris over the Dallas region. The shuttle, as far as we understand, has broken up, the Shuttle Columbia. We can go now to our correspondent James Reynolds, who is in Jerusalem. James, of course, momentously, historically, one of the astronauts on board the Space Shuttle Columbia was Israeli, the first Israeli astronaut to go into space.
Anita, that's correct, and the launch of Ilan Ramon into space was really a huge event in Israel's history. Just a few weeks ago when the launch took place, it was dominated by coverage here. All the main television stations spent about a day previewing his flight, having on their screens a countdown from about 20 hours down to 0 for his launch. They did live satellite interviews with his family in Florida. There were extensive profiles of him. There was a lot of discussion of how he would celebrate the Jewish Sabbath in space. It really caught the imagination in the ways that I think the Space Shuttle's launch in the early 80s caught the imagination of the American people.
What skills did Ilan Ramon bring to the shuttle?
He brought skills as a combat pilot and many years, about 30 years experience in the Israeli Air Force, but there was some controversy as to exactly why he was taken on board. He was not a trained scientist in terms of having a doctorate or anything like that, but Israel's Air Force had been in a strong and long liaison with NASA, and it was thought appropriate that the first Israeli astronaut should be someone from the Israeli Air Force, and I believe that's why he was chosen. He had a long record in the Israeli Air Force. He served in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and we are also told that he took part in the 1981 bombing of an Iraqi nuclear reactor. I think there was some concern of security around him because of his role in Israel's offensive operations in the last few decades, and I think there was security was stepped up.
This orange fuel tank is covered with, it's insulating foam. It's kind of a rigid insulating foam, and the reason it's got that foam, as I turn to this camera, I'm going to hold it up a little higher for you here. The reason it's got that foam is inside here is the coldest substance on Earth, liquid hydrogen. Ice forms at the top here, and that insulation is there to try to prevent as much of that as possible. The problem is, as the shuttle rises to orbit, that ice breaks off. It can strike pieces of the shuttle as it goes, causing some damage to what is the fragile outer skin of the shuttle. Space Shuttle Columbia is covered by more than 20,000 fragile ceramic tiles. Those tiles are critical because they are what carry the heat load as a space shuttle comes in. We're talking in excess of 2,000 degrees. And it is, after all, an aluminum airframe underneath all those tiles. There was a piece of debris which struck the shuttle as it came off. Was it a piece of foam? Was it a piece of ice? Engineers were looking at it. They determined, looking very closely at these high-speed, very close cameras that they have, that this was not a significant issue. It was not anything that caused any sort of problem for the tiles. Or what is right along here is a substance called carbon-carbon. Let me see if I can tilt that for you. There you go. Right on the leading edge of the wing. These are some of the hottest places on the space shuttle. And this is made of what's called carbon-carbon. It's a substance which is able to withstand tremendous amounts of heat, is very hard, and given where it is and what it does, it has to maintain that airfoil, because the shuttle is, after all, a glider as it comes in for landing. It is a very, very important piece of the pie here, and if something fell on that and caused some damage, who knows what the implications of that might be. I'm not sure who we have left on the beeper line right now All right, we understand that President Bush is being briefed at Camp David as we speak. We have had Jerry Lineker and Norm Thagard online. I just don't know which one is available to us right now. Who is available to us, please? I have nobody right now, I guess. All right, let's take a look at this launch that I was just telling you about with the piece of debris. If we could run that through the telestrator, that'd be very helpful. I see you have it circled there. All right, now take a look inside that red circle there. Got this very, very slow. Look at that piece right there. What was that? We don't know. The engineers looked very closely at that and looked at it. Maybe that, I'm actually not sure I'm seeing it just now. Dave Santucci might have to help me, our producer, and help me identify it. It took him a long time looking at it to get a sense of what we're talking about. But there was something that fell off. The question was, what did it do? I talked to some people at Kennedy Space Center. They said this is not something of grave concern to us. because we don't think it caused any damage. And they have much better cameras than what you're seeing here that can really, really home in on this and give you a sense of what's going on. They told us that it was nothing to worry about, and the only reason they were investigating it is, and this was the words of the engineer I spoke with, was that we had nothing else to work on because everything else was running so flawlessly. Jerry Lininger, back on the line with us. Jerry Lininger, shuttle veteran, veteran of Mir. Debris falling off that external tank, and I don't want to get too far down this road of speculation here, but that is something that is treated with great seriousness, isn't it? Huh? I guess we don't have Jerry.
Wieder Eintritt in die Atmosphäre und damit zum Absturz der Fähre geführt hat.
Könnte es denn sein, wie Sie es eben angedeutet haben, dass die NASA da nicht ganz richtig reagiert hat? Ich kann mich erinnern, damals 1986 wurden solche Vorwürfe laut, als eben die Challenger abgestürzt ist.
Ja, man darf nicht vergessen, das Shuttle-Programm ist ja jetzt schon einige Jahrzehnte alt. Die Dinger, die da fliegen, sind nicht mehr die jüngsten. Die NASA hat auch nicht das Geld, um jetzt die nächste Generation auf die Abschussrampe zu stellen oder geschweige denn zu bauen. Deswegen müssen diese Fähren so weit wie möglich wieder gewartet werden und werden dann wieder ins All geschossen. Aber irgendwann ist halt auch da die Lebenszeit abgelaufen. Die NASA konnte natürlich, nachdem beim Start diese Isolierung abgebrochen ist und gegen den Flügel geschlagen ist, nicht viel machen. Die Fähre war ja schon unterwegs und man musste dann warten, bis sie wieder in die Erdatmosphäre eintritt, weil das eigentlich immer die gefährlichste Phase ist. Wenn die Fähre in die Erdatmosphäre eintritt, dann ist sie ungeheuren Kräften ausgesetzt, sehr hohen Temperaturen, sehr großem Widerstand aus der Luft. Und da stellt sich dann immer heraus, ob und was an dieser Fähre noch ganz ist und was vielleicht überholt werden muss. Und diesmal scheint es so zu sein, als ob es zu spät gewesen wäre.
Mhm. Wenn so kleinere Sachen passieren, dann gibt es ja vielleicht auch Notfallpläne. Gab es irgendwas in dieser Richtung, was da noch hätte gemacht werden können, von dem Sie vielleicht wissen?
Es ist schwer zu sagen. Nach dem Absturz der Challenger hat man ja versucht, die Sicherheitsmaßnahmen ein bisschen zu verstärken. Und die Astronauten sitzen ja auch in einer Art Sicherheitskabine drin, die, soweit ich weiß, ähnlich wie bei einem Flugzeug mit so einer Art Schleudersitz dann rausgeschleudert werden kann und an Fallschirmen dann zur Erde zurückfliegen kann. Das hatte damals bei der Challenger nicht funktioniert, weil die Explosion zu überraschend kam und zu schnell und die Fähre auch noch nicht weit genug von der Erdoberfläche entfernt war.
Ja,
jetzt
wir sehen hier auch, glaube ich, Entschuldigung, dass ich Sie kurz unterbreche, die Bilder von der Challenger von 1986, die unsere Kollegen uns da einspielen. Es war ja der 28. Januar, alle haben noch gejubelt, als die Challenger hochging. Gespannte Blicke sehen wir da und eben hatten einige geklatscht und dann die Explosion in 17 Kilometern Höhe. Ja, und da schlug natürlich die Freude sofort um in tiefe Trauer. Und hier sehen wir noch mal die aktuellen Bilder der Raumfähre Columbia und die einzelnen Punkte, die eben darauf hindeuten, dass die Raumfähre auseinandergebrochen ist. Aber Ralf Hogestraat, ich hatte Sie unterbrochen. Entschuldigung, Sie wollten uns noch etwas erzählen.
Ja, was ich sagen wollte ist, es besteht durchaus die sehr geringe Möglichkeit, dass die Astronauten überlebt haben, wenn sie tatsächlich in dieser Art Schleudersitz waren und rechtzeitig sich absprengen konnten. Aber die Möglichkeit ist, wie gesagt, sehr gering.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank, Ralf Hogestraat. Ich glaube, ich hatte mich vorhin etwas vertan. In 60.000 Metern Höhe war wohl die Raumfähre Columbia, als der Kontakt dann abbrach zur Weltraumbehörde NASA. Das soll es erstmal gewesen sein.
All right. I will continue on with my soliloquy as we look at these pictures coming from WFAA of multiple targets streaking across central Texas. Palestine, Texas is the place. And it occurred about 15 minutes before the anticipated landing of the Space Shuttle Columbia. And that should give you a sense of the speed. 15 minutes prior to landing, it's over Texas. This is a fast-moving vehicle, and still at a very high altitude, some 200,000 feet. Commercial airliner, 35,000, 40,000 maximum, so 5 times higher than you would ever fly in a commercial airliner. And many, many times faster, 6 or 7 times faster. All right, Jerry Lineker is back with us. Jerry, I was talking a little bit about this piece of debris, which they were looking very closely at on ascent. That's a serious concern, isn't it?
Yes, Miles. There's, you got a tremendous speeds and vibration, and obviously launch is something I think everyone knows how dynamic that is. But usually it's a large hunk of ice that can fall off, and you're worried about it hitting part of the orbiter itself, possibly one of the tiles or some of the insulation material. And then during re-entry, you've got some major heat buildup, and so you need those tiles.
And these tiles, there have been several cases. You go back to some of the early shuttle missions before they had wrung out all the details on how to adhere these tiles. I remember it was STS-3 or 4, third or fourth shuttle mission. Multiple tiles fell off because basically what happened was moisture got in, it froze on orbit, popped those tiles off. And I do recall on one mission where they actually trained a spy satellite on the shuttle, Columbia, to see if those tiles were critical tiles. Some tiles are more important than other tiles, aren't they?
They are over, components that you absolutely need, say control, actuators, things like that. So yes, some are more important than others, but you'd rather have the 100% there during re-entry. And again, if they looked at it hard, they probably had some very good filming during the launch to make sure that it wasn't a problem, and we would have heard about it probably in more detail, but of course they're going to be looking at everything.
All right, and I don't want to spend too much time going down what is an area of speculation at any case at this point anyway, but I wanted to point that out to our viewers to give you some context to the kinds of things that will be discussed as this investigation begins. Jerry, I hope you're still watching CNN. I'm going to show you some still photos that one of our viewers sent us. Take a look at this first shot. This comes from Adam. I don't have Adam's last name, but Adam, I thank you for it. If we can put the SP-103 on the air, please. And I'll show you what comes from Texas. And if you look, can we put that through the telestrator as well so I can point out where things are? I'm trying to get that worked out as soon as we get that. But is what you can see, if you can see my pointer there, okay, right here in the upper center of your screen, that is the shuttle, Columbia, streaking across the sky. I've been exhorting viewers all morning to go out and take a peek. You'll notice one tail, okay? Now, this is clearly in the order of them taking. This is very distinct. And this, I am presuming, is the next photo. And what you see very, very clearly here is piece number 1, piece number 2. All right, that's picture number 2. Now, as we continue on, you see it's harder to make this out. But what we're seeing here is it looks like multiple pieces. This could be out of order. That might have occurred before the previous one, but you'll see what amount to a bunch of little dots there. Those are significant pieces that we're seeing that are superheated. Let's listen to James Hartsfield in Houston for a minute, shall we?
No communications or tracking data was received from Columbia since that time. Search and rescue forces have been alerted in the north central Texas vicinity and eastern Texas. Any persons in those areas reporting debris should avoid any debris that may be associated with the space shuttle's contingency, as it may be hazardous and toxic due to the toxic nature of propellants that are used on board the shuttle. Any such debris that is located should also be reported as quickly as possible to local law enforcement agencies. Again, a space shuttle contingency has been declared in mission control. Flight controllers here are securing all information and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia.
James Hartsfield.
The last communications from which were received at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time.
James Hartsfield,
this is Mission Control, Houston.
Who is sitting in one of those consoles there in Mission Control. You can't see him right now, but what you're seeing is a group of people who are got to be a fair amount of shock, astonishment, and deep sadness in that room right now. But as is their job, they must now continue the process and begin what is the early stages of an investigation into what went wrong. Let's look one more time. I wanted to show you that last picture we received from our viewer, just to give you a sense. I've been showing you progression shots. If we go back to SP-103, please. I can show you, and it's zoomed in, and you can see down here let's give you a sense of, there's a spot there, spot there, spot there. Three, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 distinct targets there, if you will. That's a bit of a euphemism. In any case, that is the final remnants of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Let's remind you of the crew and tell you who was there. The commander, Rick Husband. He was flying his second shuttle mission, his first as a commander, colonel in the United States Air Force. You know, this is the stuff of boyhood dreams. Rick Husband always wanted to do what he was doing at that moment we just told you about. Born in July of 1957. Willie McCool, shuttle pilot, selected by NASA in 1996, gone through the training, and this was his first mission, commander in the United States Navy. Kaplana Chawla, this was her second mission. STS-107 was her first back in 1997. She was born in India and is a U.S. citizen. Like to do aerobatics and tailwheel airplanes, among other things. PhD. David Brown, up next. David Brown, born in 1956 in April. Also his first flight, a captain in the United States Navy. He was a mission specialist, which means he wasn't in the front two seats flying, but has, to his credit, 2,700 flight hours, 1,700 in high-performance military aircraft, and his parents reside in Virginia. Michael Anderson, on his second flight, STS-89 was his first back in January of '98. He visited the Mir space station at that time, and he selected by NASA in 1994, mission specialist, born December of '59, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. Laurel Clark, also a mission specialist. This was a busy scientific mission. They used a thing called the double space hab module, a couple of school bus size, about the size of a school bus scientific lab. She was very involved in this as a medical doctor and a commander in the United States Navy, hailed from Iowa, was flying her first flight. A fair amount of rookies on this particular one. And then the one that captured a lot of our attention, and liftoff in particular, especially because of the concerns for security, Ilan Ramon, a colonel in the Israeli Air Force, who had a very, very decorated career as an F-16 fighter, including a raid in the mid-'80s on an Iraqi nuclear reactor, which was taken out by the Israeli Air Force. That was never publicly, officially confirmed, but we got that from sources that he was one of the people who took out that nuclear facility in Iraq. He became the first Israeli to fly in space, 3,000 hours of flight time in A4s and F-16s and the like. There you see the full crew in their suits, and I'll just point out something about these suits. They're called launch and reentry suits, pumpkin suits they call them. I guess it's obvious why they call them that. They are full pressure suits. They put those helmets on when they come in, and those pressure suits are designed to allow them to withstand a sudden decompression, loss of oxygen, or pressure inside the crew module, which is kind of almost a self-contained module inside the space shuttle. All right. We have another witness. I'm just going to finish my thought here. It is perhaps not widely known that there's no way for the crew to eject from a space shuttle. First couple of missions, there were ejection seats for the pilot and co-pilot. They could have punched out, literally exploding right through the kind of the roof, if need be. But it was not determined, not practical, to come up with an ejection system that worked for 7 people. And thus, a lot of it had to do with weight and money, quite frankly. There was never an ejection system that was designed or built into the space shuttle. Crew trained for some evacuation bailout procedures. But as we heard from Kyle Herring of NASA just a little while ago, 200,000 feet, Mach 6, there was nothing any crew member could do in that situation in order to get away from the vehicle. Now, we have a witness from near Susie Vagu, is that correct? Vagu? Susie is on the line. She saw and heard something. She's joining us from Central Texas. Susie, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm in Huntington, Texas,
All right.
Angelina County.
All right. Well, tell me what you saw and what you heard.
Approximately 9 o'clock this morning, we heard a tremendous rumbling sound, and the dogs immediately. We have a horse ranch and raise horses, and the dogs went nuts. One of my guys was in the barn, and one of our horses literally jumped at him. The place, we had a tremendous fog, and one of the guys that worked for me just came up to me and informed me that he feels that there's some rubber burning in our pasture, and he just went to go check. Listening to the scanner, we understand that all in Moffett and San Augustine County, Nacogdoches, and Angelina County, that there's debris. Also on the scanner, probably at about 9:15 right before CNN was announcing what in fact it was, the scanners were saying for the sheriff to go ahead and that it could have been the space shuttle. If you found anything, it was federal, to seal it off, not let anybody touch it, don't contaminate it, don't get near it.
Well, those are words to the wise, aren't they? What else have you heard on those scanners? Any sort of indications of people actually encountering debris?
Well, we're hearing that there's a whole bunch of debris in Moffett County, also in Jasper. We've heard. Actually, let me put the guy that works for me on the phone, and he just heard a whole bunch of stuff.
Hello.
Hello, Benjamin Laster. Go ahead. I believe we have another witness on the line. I'm sorry to the previous person. I wasn't able to hear the last part of that. Benjamin Laster, what did you see and hear?
Well, the barn and stuff. We was feeding the horses and stuff in the barn, and the barn started shaking all of a sudden and stuff like that. And I'm riding through the pasture, fixing to go back out there, and I smell some rubber. You know what smells like rubber burning. But I'm fixing to go find out and just see if there's anything laying around and stuff, because they're saying not touch nothing or stuff like that. So I don't know if I'm going to have anything or not. But here's my boss. You can talk to her.
Yeah, I'm sorry to do that. He was, up here and telling me all kinds of stuff. Hello?
Who did we just hear from, please?
Lynn, what's your last name? That's what I thought. Lynn Hearn.
Okay, I apologize. I was a little confused. I didn't know you handed the phone over. Somebody was yakking at me in my ear. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so he smells burning rubber. He hasn't gone out to investigate just yet.
He's going out right now. I had him stand by in case he knew of something.
Yeah, okay. And now you're not a member of the authorities. You're a scanner listener, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We were woken up by this rumble.
Right.
Today we were trying to sleep in on Saturday, and we heard this. Sounded like a train going through our property. We have 240 acres, and it sounded like it was in, the driveway.
Yeah, yeah. What's next in that part of the world? Do you have any sense
We're
of
in
any?
East Texas. We're kind of in between Houston and Dallas.
When I'm trying to get a sense of what's going on right now, you're getting a sense that there's any sort of search or rescue effort underway at the moment?
Yes, there's a tremendous effort underway. All the counties on the scanner, you can hear them. They're finding debris from all over the place.
I wonder if you could put your phone up to one of those scanners for us and keep us. Is there a way you could do that for us? So we can hear it.
I'm trying to get here.
Yeah. Are they talking about it right now?
Now they're not. It's not. Earlier there was somebody that had reported in Zavala that there was something huge. Couldn't tell because of the tremendous fog. The fog has now lifted, so any debris should be quite visible.
You said it was foggy at the time then, huh?
Yes, tremendous fog. The haze was reported at one time that there was probably not even a half a mile visibility. On our property, I couldn't see very far.
Have you heard anything on those scanners that gives you any sense that anybody was injured on the ground?
I did not hear of any injuries. I only heard of a bunch of debris being found in different places. One gentleman supposedly pulled off of Highway 69 near Zavala, near the lake, the fishing lake down in Zavala, because he had seen debris falling.
I see. Okay. Well, would you do us a favor? Keep an open line to us, and if you would listen to those scanners for us, and if you hear anything, or if you can put a tape recorder on it so we can hear what's going on, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, stay on the line. All right, who else do we have with us? No response. I will assume that means nobody. So let's take a... I don't know who this is. Who is this, please?
This is Benjamin Laster.
Benjamin,
Yes.
Good to have you with us. I'm sorry I'm not getting a lot of guidance out here as to who's on the line, so I apologize. Benjamin, you are from Central Texas as well?
Yes, I'm in between 7 Points and Kemp, Texas. And my wife and I, my wife had said the shuttle would be coming over. And so my wife and I and my child went outside, along with my dad, and we seen the shuttle coming over. And as we seen it coming over, we seen a lot of light, and it looks like debris and stuff was coming off of the shuttle. But they said, "Look at this stuff coming off the shuttle." And I said, "That's probably the shields on the shuttle that keep it from when it enters, not to get too hot."
Yeah.
And so as we kept looking, we seen it out the back door, and we come to the front door, and we seen large masses of pieces coming off of the shuttle. And as it was coming by, we also noticed, because it seemed awful close, a plane pretty close to it, but we didn't see any kind of impact.
All right, Benjamin, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you, because I'm having a hard time hearing you. They keep talking to me. Did you say there's a plane nearby?
It was a plane nearby the shuttle as it was going.
No, I'm not talking to the producer in the control room. Please be quiet in the control room for 1 minute. I want to talk to Benjamin. Benjamin, you said a plane was nearby?
It seemed like a plane was nearby. It sure did. As it was going by, I said, "Ooh, that's awful close." That's what we said. You know, that plane being that close.
What sort of plane, Benjamin?
It looked like a commercial jet. I mean, it was.
Oh, all right. So this could have just been a coincidence, seeing it, or would you normally see a commercial jet in that area at where you saw it?
I guess you would, but not that close to the shuttle. I mean,
when you say how close to the shuttle, how close do you mean?
Well, I mean, looking from where I was looking, it seemed like they were awful close, and I mean, it just seemed like they was awful close, like it could have been even a close call. But you know, we didn't notice anything from there. But then after we was on the front porch, the house kind of shook, and we noticed a sonic boom. That kind of shook the house. At least we thought it was a sonic boom, but you know, I don't know. And then we've seen a big, continuous puff of vapor or smoke stream come out, and then we noticed a big chunk go over, and that's what we saw.
All right, Benjamin Lester, joining us from that part of Central Texas. And we should caution our viewers, and this is no reflection on Mr. Lester or anybody else we're going to be hearing from, but frequently we get witness accounts at this juncture of any incident, plane crash, whatever it may be, that do not bear themselves out. The fact that an airplane was nearby, I should tell you that the space shuttle was at an altitude of 200,000 feet. So even if there was a commercial airliner or any sort of airplane in that area, it would have been significantly lower. So we'll just...
Absolutely no reason to think that in this instance. You know, again, we have no information from the spacecraft itself, but I cannot imagine a more difficult target to attack than a spacecraft above the Earth's atmosphere.
Because it was so high up?
Yes. I mean, yes. And again, this is speculation, and I really can't engage in that. All I can tell you for sure is that we've lost contact with the orbiter. It should have landed more than half an hour ago and didn't.
Would it have some kind of escort into Florida?
No, typically not until the very last part of its approach to the Kennedy Space Center.
You've been listening there to an interview carried out by my colleague Philip Hayton on News 24, an interview with the NASA spokesman John Ira Pettit, conducted some little while ago, I think, as the early events started to unfold. We can go live now to Washington and to my colleague there, John Lyon. John, anything official yet to emerge from Washington?
No more beyond this very brief statement from the White House that terrorism was not suspected as a cause, and also the suggestion that there could be a statement by the President on a domestic matter later today. So I think that's pretty clear that when things do clarify, President Bush will speak to the nation. I can just fill you in a few more details here. This is apparently the very first time they've ever had a problem with a spacecraft on re-entry. Of course, there have been disasters in the US space program before, but the most vulnerable point was always thought to be taking off, of course, when the spacecraft's fully laden with fuel.
Let's go to CNN's Suzanne Malveaux at the White House. And apparently the president has been at Camp David. They've set up a bit of a task force within the government to try to go through all this and get a sense of what happened. And he will be on his way to the White House right around the noon hour to, get a full, his hands on the reins here in order to get a sense of what's going on and how to proceed as the investigation begins very early. Now, Gene Meserve told us, and it's very, I want to caution that we mention terrorism in this day and age always when things like this happen, because the sad fact is that is a part of our life right now. But the initial indication that we have from Gene Meserve, who covers Homeland Security for us, and from just plain common sense, is that a shuttle streaking along as it is right now, 6 times the speed of sound, 200,000 feet, is not in a place where it could become a target of terrorism. Let's go to Suzanne Malveaux at the White House now. Suzanne, tell us about what the president is doing right now.
Well, the president is heading back to the White House. As you know, he was to spend the weekend at Camp David. He was notified of the situation earlier this morning. We are told that they are trying to get as much information as possible, but they realized how serious it was, and it was the best decision that the president come back here to the White House to monitor situations here. As you can imagine, it is a very serious tone here at the White House. We have seen administration officials, we've seen staffers rushing back here once they heard the news. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of activity here later in the day. We have not been told yet whether or not there's going to be any type of formal briefing, but as you can imagine, there are certainly signs of people who are very concerned here at the White House. They are taking it very seriously, and as I indicated before, the president is heading back here to the White House later this afternoon. Miles.
Suzanne Malveaux at the White House, please keep us posted on all of this. We got some still photographs which we'd like to share with you. We've been showing you that video, but in some cases still photographs tell a story in a different way for us. And these come from a viewer who emailed them to us here. If you take a look at this first shot, I'll highlight it if, assuming it is through the telestrator now, and I'm hoping that's the case. You see the shuttle right there. What's significant about this is that is exactly what you would expect to see. Like a bright dot, and then one, the term contrail doesn't really apply because that's kind of streaking plasma, superheated, ionized air. I don't want to get too technical with you, but that's basically what we're talking about at that altitude. Now, I believe this next one is the next one in the series, although I'm not positive. What you see there is a very bright flash right at the center there. Clearly something very, as NASA's term would be, extremely dynamic occurred at that point. What you also see are a series of little dots all around. I don't want to cover it over, so I'll take it out. But you see those little dots? That is debris. And clearly that is, there's no mistaking what that is. That is in-flight breakup, straight and forward. And finally, although I'm not sure this is the correct order, what you see are 2 very significant targets right there. 2 big pieces, separated, breakup, 200,000 feet, 6 times the speed of sound. The crew, 7 people. 7 people who all dreamed of flying to space and dreamed of doing what they're doing. The crew led by Commander Rick Husband and supported by his pilot, William Willie McCool. And as we look at more pictures, this is the WFAA tape, which shows you what I just showed you in still form. All right. We have, we're getting all kinds of, let's listen to James Hartsfield in Houston for a minute, if we could.
Mission control as a result of the loss of communication with the Space Shuttle Columbia this morning at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time as Columbia was descending toward a landing in Florida. At the time, Columbia was at an altitude of approximately 200,000 feet above north central Texas. No communications or tracking from Columbia has been received by Mission Control since that time. Search and rescue authorities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in portions of East Texas and other pertinent areas have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency. Any debris that is found that may be related to the Space Shuttle's contingency should be avoided and may be hazardous due to the toxic nature of propellants that are used on board the Space Shuttle. The locations of any possible debris should be reported immediately to local law enforcement authorities. In Mission Control, flight controllers continue through contingency procedures designed to secure all information, data, and notes pertinent to today's descent of the Space Shuttle Columbia. This is Mission Control, Houston.
Call any of those people. All right, that was James Hartsfield in Houston giving us an update, Public Affairs Officer for NASA, sitting in the control room. You see screen left, screen right, you see tape of the final minutes of the Space Shuttle Columbia on its 28th flight coming down, the 113th shuttle mission. Greg Soule is on the line, and he is in the I know who he is. He's the Public Information Officer. That's okay. Thank you, Control Room. I appreciate your help. Greg Soules, Public Information Officer, who's joining us from Nacogdoches County in Texas. Greg, what can you tell us?
Well, we have several pieces of debris that have been reported as coming down within the city of Nacogdoches. Each and every one that we have reported to us, we're sending officers out to stand by with. We're holding these areas secure until we receive further instructions from the federal government.
How many sites are you aware of?
I don't have an exact number. All I know is there are several at this point.
And do you have any sense of how, I mean, at 200,000 feet traveling that fast, I imagine the debris field could stretch for many, many miles. Do you have any sense of it?
I have no idea where else. All I know is we have some within the city of Nacogdoches, and again, we're asking the public if they find it to call us and stay away from it.
And do you have any reports, Mr. Soule, of any injuries on the ground?
No, not from here at this time, no.
Okay. Is this a fairly thinly settled area?
Well, we're a university town of approximately 30,000 people. It's a small town, but then it's not a large town. And the areas that we're finding these, of course, are in town, but they're like we're finding some in the middle of the road and things like that. But we have not had any reports of any damage or any injuries as of yet.
Okay. And did you see or hear anything personally?
No, sir, did not.
Okay. And have you heard first-person accounts from people there?
No.
Okay. And give us a sense of how much assistance you're receiving from outside right now.
Well, at this point, we're just beginning to gear up. We're fixing to activate our emergency operations center with the city, and that's all that's forthcoming right now. Like I say, there's several of us doing 3 jobs until we get everyone in.
Have you had any contact with federal authorities?
I have not personally. I know we've been in contact with the FBI, yes.
Okay, the FBI. All right. Greg Soule with the Nacogdoches County authorities there, Public Information Officer, on the line with us, giving a sense of what is happening on the ground there in Central Texas, which is, the shuttle was about 200,000 feet above Central Texas when it broke up. We can only imagine the debris field is going to be rather spread out and extensive, and we caution those of you who listen to us and can hear us now, by all means please do not touch anything you suspect to be debris from the space shuttle. It could be very hazardous. There's a toxic brew of chemicals inside these shuttles, nitrogen tetroxide, hydrazine, which can cause you all kinds of health problems, short-term and long-term. It can burn you, it can give you cancer. All of the thrusters on the space shuttle, you see these little black dots down here in the end, these are where the thrusters are powered in this combination of hydrogen and nitrogen tetroxide. And it is nasty stuff. And a space shuttle is just a witch's brew of those kinds of things. And you would be putting yourself in great peril if you were to pick up or handle any piece of the shuttle. It's federal property. You also might find yourself answering to authorities. So please let it be. Pick up the phone. Let's listen to James Hartsfield one more time in Houston, please.
Through contingency plans designed to secure all information and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia. Communications with the Space Shuttle Columbia were lost at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time this morning At an altitude of about 200,000 feet above north-central Texas, as Columbia was en route to a landing planned at 8:16 a.m. Central Time at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. At the time communication was lost, Columbia was traveling approximately 12,500 miles per hour. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth vicinity and in portions of East Texas and other pertinent areas have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency.
We're listening to James Hartsfield.
Debris that may be related to the Space Shuttle contingency that is located should be avoided and may be hazardous due to the toxic nature of propellants.
All right, he's restating what I just told you.
Shuttle.
Let's bring him down if we could. James Hartsfield is a public affairs officer for NASA. He's sitting in a console there at Mission Control, giving us the latest on what we know. The shuttle was traveling at 12,500 miles an hour. It's hard to even imagine that kind of speed. We're talking about something that exceeds the speed of a bullet when you're seeing what you're seeing now at an altitude of 200,000 feet. Tremendous pressure and forces on the craft at that moment. Now, granted, the air is thin there, and the idea is to ease the shuttle in, slow down as you come in, and ease that, gradually apply the brakes, if you will. But a tremendous amount of pressure. Now, the Space Shuttle fleet was designed to fly 100 missions each. Each airframe was certified to fly 100 missions. And to date, the entire fleet has flown 113 missions. This was Columbia's 28th flight. And thus, it is well below what would have been its useful capacity, at least as an airframe. The target in all of this, the landing site, if you want to just take a look at it, we could just give you a sense of where they head to. 15 minutes from where it broke up, the Space Shuttle deorbit burn begins over the Indian Ocean, and the brakes just keep coming as they come down for the world's most harrowing glider ride is really a good way to describe it. As we zoom in on the Kennedy Space Center, and what you see here is those are the launch pads. That's where Columbia left from 16 days ago. That's the big vehicle assembly building. That's where we view the launches, right in that spot right there. There's about, just to give you a scale, there's 3 miles in between those two sites. That's as close as anybody gets to a Space Shuttle launch, except for the crash team. And the crash team sits about a mile away right there. Zooming in here, you see the vehicle assembly building, and down the runway, this is runway 33, which is where the Space Shuttle was headed. It's a northwest to southeast runway, 15,000 feet in length. Not too terribly much longer than what you'd find at a big international airport, but much wider, 300 feet wide. Space Shuttle Columbia never made it to its intended destination today. Let's get CNN's Patty Davis on with us. Patty, what can you tell us?
Well, Miles, the FAA is saying that it had not had any contact with the shuttle. That shuttle, of course, at about 200,000 feet when it appears to have broken up. The FAA air traffic control would have come into play at about 60,000 feet, and I'm told it would have directed the aircraft in just like any other aircraft that it was bringing in. But it just did not get to that point. Now, the NTSB would most likely play a role in this accident investigation, in the Shuttle Challenger accident. It had a technical advisor role, most likely would have that same type of role in this instance. Now, one safety expert, a former NTSB official, telling me what probably you'll need to look at here, since terrorism seems unlikely here, is an aging aircraft issue. Now, I know, Miles, you said these shuttles meant to fly about 100 missions, but this particular shuttle, some 22 years old, and this former NTSB official saying that certainly the age here could have played a role. Now, as far as terrorism is concerned, now for commercial aircraft, one of the things that officials have been worried about recently is surface-to-air missiles. We're told that, however, that the highest, even the most sophisticated of those surface-to-air missiles could only reach about 60,000 feet in the air. So not particularly a factor, not likely to be a factor in this case. One safety expert saying perhaps that the only way terrorism could have played a role here, something had been placed on board perhaps. Miles?
All right, let's listen in James Hartsfield one more time. Let's see if he has any news for us. James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer in Houston. Let's listen.
At approximately 8 a.m. Central Time, as it flew at an altitude of 200,000 feet and a speed of approximately 12,500 miles per hour toward a planned landing at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, touchdown for Columbia was scheduled for 8:16 a.m. Central Time in Florida.
All right. He appears to
Search
be
and rescue teams in the
recapping
Dallas-Fort
what we
Worth
know. So
vicinity.
we'll bring James down. And we have with us on the line, as we let's show that videotape if we can again. It's stunning videotape captured by our affiliate WFAA out of Dallas. Specifically, the man with the camera hoisted on his shoulder was John Prague. John, are you with us?
Yes.
John, I don't know how much experience you have with space and shuttles, but did you have the sense as you watched this that something was amiss?
Well, I'd seen the shuttle once on reentry. I was in West Texas, and I heard it, sonic boom, and I saw it pass over with the one contrail. So, yes, when I saw all these contrails with reflective material in the early morning sky, it did seem unusual, but I have limited experience seeing the shuttle on reentry. So,
yeah.
Appear, and even our anchor made mention of it. We did a live shot at a little after 8 o'clock when it came over Dallas-Fort Worth.
And we're talking about 8 o'clock Central Time here, just to clarify for our viewers out there who are in various time zones. John, what did you hear as you were shooting that? Do you recall?
I didn't hear anything.
You were pretty far away, of course.
Yes, we were listening to NASA. They were giving us updates on where the shuttle was, and so we could get an idea when it would come over Dallas-Fort Worth. We heard it that it was coming over Northern California, then Arizona, and then El Paso. And at that point, I started watching for it, of course. And suddenly it appeared, and so I turned my camera on and started to roll video, and we shot it live as it came over Dallas-Fort Worth.
And at what point then did you have some realization that something went wrong?
When I came back into the station, they were saying it was overdue, and that's when we started to re-roll the tape, and then information started coming out of NASA. But it wasn't until I actually got back in the newsroom that people were saying, well, it's overdue.
John Prague, videographer, WFAA, our affiliate in Texas. John Prague, we thank you for your efforts in giving us this insight in the immediate aftermath of the demise of the Space Shuttle Columbia, breaking up into several pieces there. Let's recap for those who are just joining us. As John mentioned, the Space Shuttle Columbia was at the tail end of a 16-day science mission, 7-person crew. They were headed back home, and somewhere over central Texas, 100 miles south of Dallas or thereabouts, this is what happened here. If you take a look here, you'll see what starts out normally quickly becomes multiple trails there, multiple trails. That's something that is very telling, and no mistaking that is an in-flight breakup. The question as to why is another matter entirely, which we couldn't get into without getting very deep into the world of speculation. But that shot tells you what happened. Why it happened will be the subject of discussion for months and perhaps years to come. But here we go. Let's take a look at the shot now. I want to call your attention. Watch that fireball. That's normal. One streak, very hot, coming from orbit, 2,000 plus degrees, dissipating heat. Boom! Look at that piece come off, and then shortly thereafter, flash. See that flash right in there? And then a piece of smoke came off, a puff of smoke. Something happened there. So something happened first, then second. And then, as it went along, further breakup, sort of a three-step process. A small piece, a flash, and then very shortly thereafter, multiple pieces of the Space Shuttle Columbia, at that point traveling 12,500 miles an hour. Just to give you a sense of it, they travel around the planet at about 17,500 miles an hour, so having lost 5,000 miles an hour of speed already, still traveling the speed of a bullet. Let's
go back now to Washington. Of course, everyone waiting for some sort of statement to come out of the White House. John Line, what's unfolding there?
Well, the president is on his way back to the White House. He was at Camp David. He's already been briefed. He's spoken to his Chief of Staff, Andrew Card, and other NASA officials to get what little there is known at the moment about the situation. I think it's almost certain the president will make a statement at some stage to the nation. It's a question of waiting really to see how much information he can gather and what the appropriate moment is. The White House officials are all coming in. They had been hoping for a quiet weekend after a very, very busy week, mainly dominated by the issue of Iraq, of course. and they are all as shocked as everybody else here. I've got one comment here from John Marburger. He's the head of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and he said, we're all watching television, we're all devastated and concerned.
The question of tone, isn't it, Leo? How, given that the President has had to, Leo Enright pointed this out to us earlier on, it was Leo in my head, sorry, when I was talking to you, John, that the President would have a difficulty picking the right tone perhaps now because circumstances he's felt have required him to be so hard in recent times, and now he's confronted with a crisis that requires him to be very soft indeed.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just to remember back to that day 17 years ago now, almost to the day actually, January the 28th, 1986, when the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster happened, of course, live on TV screens in such a terrible way. And that was really one of the defining moments of President Reagan's presidency. The way he just chose the words for that memorial service for those astronauts, words which many of the nation could still quote now, I think, written by his famous speechwriter Peggy Noonan. And I think that in due course, we're maybe getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but the way the President now speaks to this will be a defining moment of his presidency, to the extent to which George W. Bush can sum up the feelings of the nation in the way that the President really is required to on these tragic moments.
John Lyon in Washington, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. In the studio with me now, we have David Wade, who is a space analyst with Mann's Space Consortium. Thank you for coming in at such short notice. What, in your assessment, has happened?
I think it's got to be related to the thermal protection system on the Space Shuttle. During the re-entry process, the biggest problem that the Space Shuttle faces is overcoming the temperatures that it will face. The Space Shuttle's flying at 13 times the speed of Concorde. It flies at 26 times the speed of sound. That's about 8 kilometers per second. And when it starts to dive into the atmosphere, when it starts to re-enter the atmosphere, the particles of air moving over the Space Shuttle's surface generate a lot of friction, and that generates a huge amount of heat. And as part of the Space Shuttle, that can heat up to 1200 degrees centigrade or so. So huge temperatures that Space Shuttle has to survive. And to do that, it has a coating on the outside, some tiles and some blankets that will survive those temperature ranges. And I think it has to be a problem with that protection system, that thermal protection system, and which has led to this heat build-up actually affecting the rest of the spacecraft and leading to it breaking up.
We don't have many clues to be going on with at this stage, but I don't think you heard my interviewing an eyewitness, or maybe you did, a news reporter from American television who'd actually been set up to film the re-entry of the shuttle in Dallas, and he had seen shuttles coming down from orbit before, and he said it was immediately apparent to him and his colleague that this was not the standard re-entry. He said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, that there were bits coming off the shuttle, basically. He saw it. It wasn't a clean re-entry, but it had a fuzziness to it, as if there was sort of associated material around the shuttle itself. Sure. Now, how would you read that?
I think that's wholly consistent with a problem with the thermal control system. A problem with the thermal control system would have allowed the aluminium structure of the Space Shuttle to be heated. At those kinds of temperatures, that structure would just break down. So I think what we're seeing there is probably the whole disintegration of the Space Shuttle at those high temperatures. And then they would each fall down towards the Earth, each one being in a blaze, in a fiery blaze as it descended.
Let's hear what that eyewitness account actually said.
We were anticipating doing a live shot at around 8 o'clock our time Central here in Dallas. And we were hearing from NASA that the shuttle was coming in over California, Arizona, and El Paso. And so at that point, I started preparing for it. And I saw it appear out of the western sky. It came up just south of downtown overhead, and that's when we started to do our live shot. And I saw all this reflective material with contrails appearing to come off the shuttle itself. And I'd seen the shuttle once before in West Texas. And it appeared just like a jet aircraft. I heard a sonic boom with one contrail, like a jet aircraft would make. So this appeared to be somewhat different.
Because it appeared to be shedding material as it flew? Was that your understanding of what you were seeing?
Yes, indeed. And so we even the anchor person commented, who had seen quite a few shuttle re-entries, said that there appears to be a lot of reflective material coming off the shuttle. But of course, at that time, we weren't sure.
Now, as the shuttle moved towards you, what happened then?
Well, it flew overhead, material came off, and then it disappeared out of the eastern sky. But of course, it had already passed over our area. It was, of course, doing over 12,000 miles an hour, so it only took a few seconds for it to pass over Dallas-Fort Worth.
So, in actual fact, the complete disintegration of the shuttle, which we think we're able to see on our screens now, you did not witness that?
Well, we were shooting it as this was happening, but the contrail went on for some time after it left Dallas-Fort Worth, and now we're getting reports that there's material in East Texas, Palestine, Texas, Mineola, Texas, which are anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half east of Dallas-Fort Worth.
You've anticipated my next question, Mr. Prong, which is this. Do we know where any of the debris might have landed yet?
Yes, we're getting reports here in our newsroom at Channel 8 that people are finding material. Of course, NASA has put out some information saying don't touch it, leave it where it is, but we're getting calls in here from all across East Texas. We even got a call from Oklahoma, but we're not sure which of these are accurate at this point.
And this debris, the area in which it's fallen, is it a densely inhabited area, or has it fallen where there is not a great density of population?
Well, the greatest population area is Dallas-Fort Worth, and the material seems to be landing in East Texas, which is rural areas, not as sparsely populated as West Texas, but not a densely populated area, mostly medium to small towns, 5,000, 10,000 people, things like that.
Well, you've been listening there to an eyewitness account from an American news cameraman there talking to me a little earlier. What would be in that debris after the enormously high temperatures that it will have been subjected to on the way down? What will be left?
What will be left really is the structure of the space shuttle. So there'll be metallic components, there'll be ceramic components, but at this stage it's not really carrying any fuel, very little fuel on board, very little dangerous chemicals that might be on board.
But NASA have been warning that the stuff is likely to be toxic and not to touch it, so...
I think that's a standard precaution. I think there is the potential for some trace elements to be left. However, I think what we're really seeing here is mainly the structure of the space shuttle. So it will be mainly aluminium. It will be mainly the blankets and the thermal coating that has remained. What will have happened, though, is during that descent, I understand that this breakup occurred at around about 90 kilometers altitude, so during that descent there would have still been some burning of those components as they fell. So all of them will be charred, they'll be very difficult to recognize, they'll be very difficult to distinguish, and that in itself will make the investigation process very difficult as well.
And the chances of finding anyone who was on board the...
They certainly don't have a crew escape system at that altitude. The only crew escape system on the way down is to parachute out of the space shuttle. And what they do is they extend a pole out of the door of the space shuttle, and then each of the astronauts jumps out, initially using that pole to make sure that they clear the wing and the tail of the space shuttle, to make sure that they get into free air, and then they parachute down like a skydiver.
There's the crew, and I was commenting about the suits that they're wearing there, those orange suits, those so-called pumpkin suits, launch and re-entry suits, they call them. Those suits were not worn in the years immediately after the first few missions up to Challenger. The crew went up in essentially a flight suit, just a jumpsuit, not a pressure suit. They wore helmets, but they didn't have the pressure suit. One of the reforms that came out of the Challenger accident was that these suits would be worn by the crew members as they rose to space and as they came back home. The idea being that if there was some sort of rapid decompression, loss of cabin atmosphere inside the flight deck and the mid-deck, that the crew could survive. But as we pointed out not too long ago, this is not a situation where the crew would even have the option of bailing out. That altitude, that speed, is not a goal. Let's listen to James Hartsfield one more time. Houston.
Continue through Space Shuttle contingency procedures designed to secure all information, notes, and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia. Communications were lost with the Space Shuttle Columbia at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time, as Columbia was above north-central Texas at an altitude of 200,000 feet, traveling approximately 12,500 miles per hour. Search and rescue forces in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in other portions along Columbia's planned route have been alerted to the Space Shuttle program contingency. Any debris that may be
All right, we're going to bring James Hartsfield down because it's a bit repetitive. If you've been watching, you know what he's going to say, which is don't touch any debris that you might see if you happen to be in that part of the world. Stay away from it. It could hurt you, could potentially kill you, and it's against the law to touch it, so don't do it. Let's go now to Jerusalem and Kelly Wallace. Kelly, Ilan Ramon, in many ways the pride of Israel.
Miles, exactly, the pride of Israel, and so as you might imagine, tremendous sadness, shock, and emotion throughout the country right now. A colleague of mine was talking to a top representative at Israel's space agency, and his quote is, "We are in shock." We know that Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, we are told, was watching events unfold on television like most of us were. His spokesman saying the Prime Minister watching those events. No formal official reaction, though, coming from the Israeli government until there is a formal announcement from NASA and from the American government. But we can tell you that when Colonel Ilan Ramon took off on the space shuttle, there was tremendous excitement in Israel. It was front-page news on the Israeli newspapers, on the Israeli television stations. Really a lot of joy. As you know, Miles, a lot of sadness in this country. There has been tremendous violence over the past few months, lots of concern about that. There were the elections just a few days ago, not a lot of excitement about that, but this was looked at as tremendous joy and pride. Colonel Ramon, we know, is married, has 4 children. His father, in fact, we understand, was watching some of the events on television at an Israeli television station a short time ago. We believe he has since left and headed to his home. Colonel Ramon has tremendous experience, more than 3,000 flight hours. Also, he took part in a mission back in 1981, a mission destroying the nuclear reactor in Iraq. He also took part in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So tremendous pride in Colonel Ramon, and right now people are just still, Miles, holding out hope that this will turn out, but right now tremendous sadness throughout Israel.
It's hard to imagine the depth of sadness as we just sort of absorb all of this, Kelly, and it's difficult to even assess it here, but there, I think, in a very profound way, a lot of hopes and dreams were flying with Ilan Ramon.
Exactly. The representative from the space agency, again, talking to my colleague a short time ago, saying really everything is lost. All the work, all the experimentation, a lot of dreams, as you said. And again, the symbol really, this being the first Israeli astronaut in space, and also coming in the context of a very difficult time. This has been more than 2 years of violence in this country, the start of the second Palestinian Intifada against Israel. The economy is dismal right now. Lots of concern about the violence, the state of the situation, the future. And again, Miles, just looking at the media attention, looking at television and newspaper coverage of this, it was really looked at by many as one piece of really good news in a sea of a lot of bad news over the past few months, Miles.
It's stunningly tragic. Please, Kelly, stay close. Let us know what you hear from the government, what you hear on the streets. Of course, we're all harkened back to the last time this happened. 17 years ago this past week, we marked the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger and its explosion. A little more than a minute after liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center, 7-member crew died there. We marked that anniversary this past week. Tom Mentier, CNN correspondent, was live on the air at that moment, has covered numerous shuttle missions over the years. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts go to the families of the 7 astronauts aboard Columbia, the family, the friends, the loved ones, immediately first. As you're well aware, the most 2 dangerous times are ascent and descent. And I asked them if we had the animation of not only the ascent but the descent. When at maximum pressure and maximum velocity, the shuttle turns red hot underneath as it re-enters the atmosphere. And what you're seeing now in these pictures, the heat is just absolutely tremendous. And as you pointed out, the multiple targets, by seeing different pieces, it is something we, of course, have seen before, but not in the same dynamics that we saw this morning. But very, very difficult to watch, not once, but a second time for me.
Yeah, take us back to that day and what that was like and what happened in the immediate aftermath.
Well, the investigation, I was there for the search for the debris, which I'm sure there would have been larger pieces because they weren't as high up in the atmosphere as they were on this one. But the investigation is going to center around this debris field that you talk about being across a very wide area of West Texas. I'm sure that the pieces that they find will not be very large. The initial descriptions that we've been hearing from West Texas are very small pieces of debris. But it's going to be a very slow, long investigation that takes a look at the airframe. As you mentioned, these airframes are certified for 100 missions, and of course Columbia nowhere near that. But again, certification and what occurs in flight or after flight, as we found out with Challenger, are not necessarily what's written in the books.
Well, it's worth pointing out to our viewers, and I know, Tom, you are well aware of this, 20-plus years after Columbia first flew, the first shuttle to fly, this is still an experimental vehicle, an experimental program. This is not an airliner, is it?
No, it's not. And every time these astronauts strap themselves in for a mission, they realize the dangers that they are about to face. They train for it for months, if not years, before they fly, while they're flying, and while they're returning. They know what the dangers are that they're facing in this program.
They do. They do understand it. Tom, if you could stay close, we may want to check in with you in just a moment. I think probably this might be a good time to hear from some of the crew members. We, of course, interviewed them before they left and got a sense of their excitement for their mission, their zest for their job. A lot of them would tell you it really wasn't a job. Let's listen to Michael Anderson.
Well, unfortunately, this mission is so packed with scientific experiments and everything. As a matter of fact, when we return, we'll be the heaviest space shuttle ever to land. So there's not a lot of room to take anything personal or special with you on this flight. So basically, I'm just going to take my notebook with my notes and a couple extra pens and pencils.
All right, Michael Anderson. We spoke to all the crew before they left, and as they always do, we asked them about the risks. We asked them about their philosophy on the risks, and to a person they say it's all worth it. Let's listen to Rick Husband, the commander.
The shuttle is a great vehicle. It is so impressive every time I sit down and study the different systems to see how well thought out this vehicle is and how well it works every time we go and fly. The fleet actually is probably only reached about a quarter of its design life. So on our particular flight, this will be the 28th flight of Columbia, and each of the airframes was designed for 100 flights. So there's still a lot of life left in the shuttle fleet, and it is, I would say, a tribute to the people who work on the shuttle in the inspections that they do, in being able to find some very minor flaws like what we're talking about here, because they do a fantastic job in doing the inspections and finding these things. And it's just like it's just kind of like normal upkeep and maintenance like you would have on your car, except that this is a much larger system. And so it is a very impressive, and certainly by myself very much appreciated, that the people are so diligent and do such a great job in keeping track of all those things.
Kind of hard to hear all those words right at this moment, but those words are all still well true. What was not added is that this is stuff that is still on the edge of the envelope, that term that test pilots use, pushing the envelope, the edge of our capabilities as human beings. is manifested in what you see right here in this space shuttle, even 20-plus years after it first flew. But I should point out something that was mentioned a while ago, and I didn't get a chance to mention it, that the concept that a space shuttle is old is a bit of a fallacy. They are certified, as we said, for 100 flights. Columbia was on our 28th mission. Every fourth or fifth mission, they go through an overhaul, which is really almost right down to the spars and aluminum, where they truly make the shuttle new. In the case of Columbia, it had, for example, a brand new glass cockpit installed as part of its last overhaul. So it is, to call it old is a bit of a myth. These are the most pampered aircraft or spacecraft, whatever you want to call it, in the world. And they're treated as such. When they say 100 missions on that airframe, that's conservative even on its own. So at 28 missions, Columbia was, in fact, sure, the old gray lady, having first flown in April. We're looking at, you obviously can see here, this is Challenger, it's the only model I have handy, but the old gray lady in the sense chronologically, but at 28 missions, Discovery still has a few others, has actually flown more missions. So it's not accurate to draw an assumption here about that necessarily. Now, let's listen to one more member of the crew. And this is the member of the crew who received so much of the attention prior to liftoff because we were so concerned about security, given what's going on in the world and given the fact that he was a citizen of Israel. Ilan Ramon. Let's listen in.
I really feel that we shouldn't talk too much about it. You know that NASA security people, and I know that NASA security people are doing their best for us. And since September 11, unfortunately, it's a kind of a world issue here. And since then, all the shuttle flights are taken care of by NASA security for the best of all of us. And I don't feel that we are any special event for them.
Well, the truth of the matter was, it was a special event. It was treated as such because of exactly who Ilan Ramon is. Let's listen to James Hartsfield one more time. Houston, public affairs officer with NASA, is giving another update.
Search and rescue teams in Dallas-Fort Worth and in portions of East Texas and other appropriate areas along Columbia's planned route have been alerted and are in contact with local law enforcement authorities in those areas. Any debris that is located in an area that may be related to the space shuttle's contingency should be avoided and may be hazardous as a result of toxic propellants used aboard the shuttle. The location of any possible debris should immediately be reported to local authorities who are in contact with NASA search teams.
All right, once again, that is a bit of a repeat, but for those of you who've been listening, we're sorry for the repetition. We just don't know when he's going to add additional information, and so we're going to listen in and keep you posted as events unfold here. Let's bring everybody up to the date. We're approaching the top of the hour. It's 11 o'clock now, and the shuttle is approaching. We're approaching the point when about 2 hours ago, almost exactly, the Space Shuttle Columbia should have been pretty much on final approach to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at the conclusion of a 16-day science mission. Instead, communication was lost. Telemetry, which is the radio signals with all the data, all the stuff that fills those computer screens in mission control, was lost. And the shuttle did not turn up at its appointed time, 9:16 a.m. Eastern Time at the Kennedy Space Center. Space shuttles, when they begin their descent, their landing is, you can set your watch to it. And so when that happened, immediately alarm bells went up. Should tell you that NASA has lowered flags near the countdown clock at Kennedy Space Center to half staff. NASA has lowered flags to half staff at the countdown clock. 7-person crew, and what you're seeing are pictures captured. Actually, you're seeing a live picture right now of Mission Control in Houston, but the picture that we've been showing you all morning long is the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia as it broke up mid-flight, 200,000 feet, traveling 12,500 miles an hour. Our affiliate WFAA capturing this dramatic videotape, which gives us a sense of what caused, well, we don't know the cause, but we do know it was a breakup. The cause. All right, let's listen. We have been trying to get our affiliates to capture the shuttle as it came across the continental United States this morning. KOAT out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. A little darker there, of course, when it came across, but I think you can see that dot there. Try to help you out and just tell you it's right in that spot right there in case you're having problems. Not quite the shot that we got, obviously, out of the Dallas affiliate, but bear in mind, the breakup occurred over Texas. This is New Mexico, so these would have been, this is exactly what you would expect to see as a space shuttle would streak across the night sky on its way to its landing. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. All right, as we look at that shot, and we will tell you that the president was at Camp David when it happened. He's on his way back, should be there about noontime, and that's where Suzanne Malveaux is. Suzanne, what do you have for us?
Well, earlier today I spoke with White House spokesman Scott McClellan, who said, yes, the president was notified of the situation by his chief of staff, Andy Card. They made the decision that it would be better to monitor the situation here from the White House. As you mentioned, the president is on his way back to the White House. He'll be here shortly after noon. Also spoke with a senior administration official who said that there was no indication that the shuttle had any type of threat that was against it, or that was in any type of range of anti-aircraft, anti-missile range, and that there was no indication that this was any type of terrorist situation. Of course, they're still getting lots of information, but initial indications from senior administration officials saying that it does not point in that direction. I should also tell you as well that sources tell us that the president, when he comes back, is expected to make a statement, some sort of briefing, that he is also expected to call Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, as you had mentioned before, one of those on the shuttle, an Israeli citizen, that the president is all likelihood to call him later this afternoon, and that we will hear from Mr. Bush when he returns. Miles.
CNN's Suzanne Malveaux. We'll, obviously, the minute the president gets back and makes a statement, we'll be getting back to you, so stay close, please. Let's go to Elizabeth Cohen. Elizabeth Cohen in the newsroom here has had an opportunity to speak with members of one of the crew members' family. And we're just going to leave it at that right now. Elizabeth, what can you tell us?
Miles, I was speaking on the phone just a few moments ago with the brother of one of the astronauts. I'm not going to name the astronaut just to protect the privacy of this family, but he said that in the past 2 hours since the contact was lost, the families have been speaking with each other. The families of the different astronauts have been speaking with each other. They met each other at the launch. There were various activities for the family members. I am sure that they did not expect to get back in contact with one another quite in this way. This gentleman was saying that he expects to be summoned to a memorial service, perhaps in Houston, sponsored, given by NASA. He expects to get that phone call soon. And again, the families turning to each other for support in this difficult time. Miles?
Did they indicate there is a fairly rigorous protocol, if you will, that NASA employs, where they have people assigned to each family member to assist them through all this? Did you get any sense that that was occurring, and were they getting the support they need?
The man who I was speaking to is a brother of one of the astronauts. He said he had had no contact from NASA. Now, perhaps the astronaut's spouse had contact, or parents, or somebody else. Perhaps this person hadn't, but others had. He did indicate, though, that he expected, and that the families expected, that they would be summoned back in.
Elizabeth Cohen, thank you very much. Let us know if you find anything else out as we continue our coverage here.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at a live picture which tells probably as much as this shot we've been showing you. Kennedy Space Center, that's in front of a place they call the Turn Basin, right beside the countdown clock. In the distance, Launch Pad 39A, where the Space Shuttle Columbia launched 16 days ago. It was a beautiful afternoon launch, the flag at half-staff, in memory of the 7-person crew of Columbia. And that launch pad, hard to say when that launch pad might be used again. Very premature to even discuss anything along those lines, but there you see it, there you see the flag, and that in many ways sums up what we are talking about here. CNN's Andrea Koppel has been talking to Israeli officials, and we should point out that in case you're just tuning in, that Ilan Ramon was a member of this crew, the first Israeli astronaut. Andrea, what have you heard?
Well, Miles, I've spoken with the spokesman from the Israeli embassy here in Washington, and he tells me that they have dispatched a small team down to the Kennedy Space Center, where Colonel Ramon's wife, his 4 children, and we believe his parents, who were quite elderly, were awaiting his arrival. The embassy itself obviously had no comment. They're waiting for the government in Jerusalem to take the lead there. But having said that, you know, just looking at this picture, Colonel Ramon was so much more than just a professional and, as you pointed out, the first Israeli to go into space, but he really was somewhat of a, you know, a national hero, the quintessential hero, if you will, for Israel. This is a man that flew in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. He fought in the 1982 war with Lebanon. He was also, believe it or not, one of the pilots that bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor back in 1981. He is a payload specialist who's been training for this mission since 1997. And in fact, his job on board the space shuttle was supposed to be basically using cameras on board to look at how desert dust and other contaminants that you would find in the atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, how that's affected by rainfall and temperature. So this was a mission that the entire Israeli public was watching and really had their heart in their hands. And at this moment, you can imagine how many hearts across Israel and certainly in this country as well are breaking right now. Miles.
Andrea Koppel, thank you very much. Certainly that is the case everywhere right now as we pause to think about those family members. Let's take a look at a picture. We've been getting some email images in from our viewers, and this is the first picture we've seen from Nacogdoches County, Texas. Don't touch it. Don't go near it. Call the authorities. Let them know it's there. Try to keep people from touching it if you can. It's apt to contain all kinds of hazardous things. Hydrazine is just on the top of my list right off the bat, which is a very nasty substance which is used to fire the rockets on orbit and also powers the auxiliary power units. Nitrogen tetroxide, which can burn you. That's an oxidizer which mixes, creates those thruster firings on orbit. Don't go near it. It can hurt you. It's also, I should point out, against the law. We've been listening in to members of the crew. I'm hopeful that we have some more of those interviews ready to go. We talked to the crew. Okay, apparently we do not have them quite ready. We're going to try to. All right, we have a reporter from where? All right, we've got somebody at the Kennedy Space Center to check in with us. Grayson Carl. Grayson, I don't know, you're with Central Florida 13.
That's right, Miles.
Grayson, tell us what's been going on there.
With Central Florida News 13, I cover the Kennedy Space Center in this area. It's a very, very surreal feeling out here. You know, we've done this several times before. You stand up, you get ready for the landing. We all look down south, and we look, and nothing came. And we're used to hearing a pair of sonic booms that come in a few minutes before the landing as the shuttle drops back through the sound barrier. And we didn't hear that, and it kind of raised everyone's eyebrows. And then everyone started looking, and the countdown clock that counts down to the landing time started counting back up, which is what it does when after it passes the landing time, and it started hitting 6 and even 7 minutes, and none of us knew quite how to handle it. The family and the visitors and the guests that were all there, I'm not sure if the astronauts' families were out there, they typically are, but all the guests, all the VIPs were ushered into NASA buses and escorted away from the shuttle landing strip. We were escorted away shortly after that. We've headed back to the press site here, which is by the vehicle assembly building in the center of the Kennedy Space Center, and really, they're not telling us much more than what you guys, I'm sure, have been finding out there in Atlanta and all over. They are scheduling some sort of press conference here for apparently 11:30. We're going to try and find out more from them at that time. But really, this whole community is just devastated. This whole area is tied to the Kennedy Space Center. We call this area the Space Coast. We grew up here. There's not a person here who doesn't know somebody who works at the Kennedy Space Center. I'm sure a lot of folks all over can identify with, you know, an Air Force base or something else nearby where it's like that. And that's what it's like here with the Kennedy Space Center. And it's just, the silence here is eerie. You know, I look at the other reporters I work with every day. We don't know what to say to each other. It's a very bizarre feeling. There's been talk about what caused this failure, and I guess the latest we've gotten is from Johnson Space Center. They said something about losing a piece of insulation off the external tank into the heat shield. And Miles, as you know, that can the heat shield is a very unpredictable part of the shuttle, but we really don't know if that's what's caused it. We're waiting till 11:30 to try and find out that information. But the community here is really, I mean, just devastated. Not only were there experiments on board Columbia, there was also some part of the ground-based experiments that were actually being done out of Florida Tech, Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne, which is just 30 miles down the road. They were doing some of the ground-based things with the European Space Agency, doing the same experiments they were doing up in space down here on Earth at almost the same time. So there are connections to this mission all through this area, the Central Florida area. People commute to the Kennedy Space Center, which is over on the coast. They commute from as far away as Orlando or even further away. And so there are people in neighborhoods all across Central Florida that, you know, the fella down the street or their friend's mom works out here at the Kennedy Space Center, and they just don't know how to handle it. It's very eerily quiet out here. Press officers have been driving back and forth in cars trying to gather information for us now. But Miles, really, we're just kind of in a state of absolute disbelief. We know what's supposed to happen, and we knew things were wrong, and just our worst fears have been confirmed.
Grayson, you know, I think many of us got the sense, even those of us who are close to the space program, that the landing was just not as big a concern. And, you know, what we have to recall here is the tremendous heat which a shuttle encounters. And I wonder if in the control room they can get that shot of the launch queued up, because we can talk about what Grayson made just a tangential reference to, which was on ascent during the launch. There was a piece of debris, which was noted by engineers, which fell off the external tank. Now, if we could roll that tape, it's very difficult to make out here, and I'm not sure that I've identified the precise moment, but if you let it roll, and this was something that was well known to engineers, because the first thing they do after a launch is pour over some camera views that you can hardly imagine, close-ups, high-speed photography, which gives them a sense of all kinds of things. And they can find out a lot of things about what happened on ascent and perhaps plan accordingly for re-entry. Now, the concern is that as you look at the shuttle's external tank there, it is covered with foam. The reason it's covered with foam is it contains liquid hydrogen. It's like minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit or something along those lines. The coldest substance on the planet. Ice foam has been noted to fall off, and at those speeds, the ice or foam, which could fall off the external tank, which is this kind of brownish color, at those speeds could damage some of these tiles. The shuttle is covered in these ceramic tiles, which are very fragile, about 20,000 of them on the Columbia alone, along with blankets and carbon and all kinds of things to protect what is an aluminum frame as it comes in for re-entry. Aluminum would be soup if it wasn't protected by the thermal system. But it's a very fragile system, and it remains the most labor-intensive aspect of keeping the shuttles aloft and keeping them flying. Now, Grayson, the conversations I had with engineers there was, we've looked at this debris falling off, we focused on where it landed, and we don't think it's a big deal. Did you hear the same things?
That's the same thing I've heard. You know, these flight engineers do this for a living. They do it every day. They find problems, and they have to make that analysis on whether it's safe and what the conditions are, whether they need to make repairs, what can happen. But
all right, we just lost our signal, unfortunately, from Grayson. And with that, we're going to turn back to Jerry Lininger. Jerry, are you at home? Jerry?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Jerry in northern Michigan at home, who veteran of the shuttle, veteran of Mayer. Jerry, it's been a little while since we talked. I'm curious if anything else has come to mind for you on what might have happened here? What sorts, and I don't want to get way ahead of this, but I mean, let's give the areas of interest that would be some of the prime suspects in this.
I think you've been covering them well, Miles. I think, you know, it's very dynamic, obviously, a lot of friction, a lot of pressure buildup when you're streaking through the atmosphere. Friction's what slows you down. You're inside a big fireball, plasma collapsing around you, so its airframe is the first thing I would worry about. You know, metal fatigue, things of that nature. I think what you mentioned, you know, if there's a defect in the insulation, a tile at a critical point, you know, if it hits for example, a control mechanism and you lose control of the vehicle, the top of the vehicle, for example, cannot withstand the type of heat that you take during re-entry. So, you know, all the things you're pointing toward are things that you have to be concerned about.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's a heck of a crew on board as you go through the people. And
let's talk about them a bit.
Well, just, you know, skilled, dedicated, courageous people.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, the people on the ground, you know, besides not touching it for their own safety, I'm sure everybody wants to, in Texas and around the world, wants to make sure we figure out what causes it so it never happens again. So.
Yeah. What, Jerry, you've been inside the space program and know exactly what happens and how NASA prepares for these to aid and assist the families. What is happening right now to help these families out?
There's usually a family escort, and that's many times an astronaut that goes along with the family, especially during the launch time. And at landing, it sort of depends on the family's request and how comfortable they feel. If it's maybe the guy's third or fourth flight, the family feels comfortable in knowing what to do. But on first flights, a lot of times they'll provide an escort to be with family. If they're going to be there at landing, I'm sure there's people there to kind of tell them what happens during landing and to ease their concerns. And now, of course, they're there to try to comfort them.
And it's probably a challenge which, well, it's got to be an incredibly difficult time for them and for these families to try to sort through all of this. Jerry, this is something that astronauts certainly know about, but I wouldn't say they fear it.
I don't think they fear it. You know, we have confidence. You heard Rick Husband, the commander, talking before he left. He's got confidence in the vehicle. Got confidence in all the great people that make that vehicle go to space. And, you know, it's obviously a tragedy of great, you know, depth here. And, you know, there's a lot of people feeling very badly. I'm sure everybody in the world feels badly.
What does this do to the program, Jerry?
You know, the interesting thing, you flashed up there, there's a cosmonaut and 2 astronauts on board space station. So you've got a space station up there orbiting that depends upon the shuttle. You have other means. You can use a Soyuz capsule, the Russian capsule, to get there. But, you know, I think exploration and discovery and going out there and pushing the envelope, and that's what the astronauts do every day of their lives up there in space.
Jerry, you mentioned an important point. We have a crew up there, Don Pettit, Ken Bowersox, Russian cosmonaut, whose name is escaping me this moment. I apologize for that. Budarin, I believe. And it is, they, at this point, are sort of not stranded. They have a Soyuz capsule there, which they can take to leave any time. And I guess we should point that out to our viewers. Are you there, Jerry? Okay. All right. Let's move on, and we'll think about that point a little bit later. United Space Alliance is the prime contractor for the space shuttle. It's a synthesis of a couple of big aerospace companies, Boeing and Lockheed Martin. USA is the prime contractor, which does the work in getting a space shuttle to orbit and bringing it back and turning it around. A lot of people don't realize that most of the employees at NASA work for contractors, and the NASA civilian force is actually a small part of it. The real work is done, in many respects, by the United Space Alliance. With us on the line now is Jeff Carr, spokesperson for USA. Jeff, are you in Florida?
No, Miles, I'm in Houston near Mission Control.
What can you tell us from your perspective? What have you seen? What have you heard? And do you have any sense of where things are headed right now?
Well, Miles, as frustrating as it may be to your viewers, we really don't know what happened. You've done a great job so far, I think, of laying out the sequence of events, and I was listening to your interview with Jerry Lininger, and I thought he brought some very level perspective to it. But right now, we're working closely with NASA to go back and review all of the data, look for anything that might be a telltale sign of what occurred. Unfortunately, our first indication that anything was wrong with what looked like a picture-perfect reentry this morning came with that loss of communications. And until we do determine what happened, our primary concern is with, of course, the safety and well-being of the crew. And until we know what happened, that's going to continue to be our primary concern.
Jeff, once again, bear with me here because I don't want to get too far down the road of speculation, but I do want to address this issue because it's out there. This is the piece of debris which fell off on ascent while it was rising to orbit. What can you tell us about what we know about that? As I've been telling our viewers, the sense I got from talking to people at NASA is that they discounted whether it, well, they basically said it wasn't a big deal.
Well, I would take exception with their discounting it, Miles. I think what happened is a lot of very smart people took using good technology, took a good look at the imagery that was available and analyzed that image and basically determined that it was not conclusive.
Jeff, let me interrupt you while you say that. Let's get that image up if we could, that ascent image, the launch image where we see, I believe if you look closely, you can see some debris falling off. Go ahead, Jeff. What was the determination as they looked at it very closely there?
Well, basically, Miles, it was a non-determination. There wasn't any indication, any immediate indication that there was any damage of note. And I think it's really, at this point, much, much too early to begin speculating that there's any linkage between that event and what has occurred this morning. We don't know what the cause is, and it just wouldn't be productive to speculate at this point.
No, and I don't want to do that, and I don't want you to have the sense that that's where I'm headed with this. It's just that this is something that people are aware of, and I wanted to at least get a sense from you as to where it stood and what the feeling was. I mean, the shuttle, in the course of its 113 mission history, has lost tiles before.
That's true, but at this point, we don't even know that there were tiles lost or to what extent they were lost, Miles. And this is one of many, many stones that's going to be overturned. We're going to be looking at every scrap of information and evidence that could help us understand what happened today. That activity is going to be ongoing for days, weeks, maybe months. I don't know. But right now, our primary concern is to determine as best we can what happened and to determine the safety and well-being of the crew. And Miles, before we go too much farther, I really want to say that those of us at United Space Alliance, our hearts go out to the families of the crew members. Their families are our families. We're a very close-knit community, and we want them to know that they're in our thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. And that's worth thinking for a moment about. Tell me this, Jeff. Can you walk me through re-entry and give me just a sense of what the vehicle encounters from the moment it does that deorbit burn all the way down to landing at the Kennedy Space Center?
Well, of course, Miles, the two most intense periods of time during a shuttle mission are the launch and ascent and the entry and landing. The launch and ascent lasts 8.5 minutes. The process of re-entry, an hour. From the time the orbital maneuvering system engines burn to deorbit the vehicle, there's a great deal of energy stored in the vehicle as a result of all the energy it's gained during ascent and that it possesses during the orbit phase. That energy's got to be depleted, and the vehicle basically breaks through the atmosphere by flying wide S-turns and sort of skipping against the atmosphere. It's a brute force operation with a little finesse to manage the loads on the vehicle and the temperatures on the vehicles. And we've never had in the history of the program an issue such as this during entry and landing, but we all know that this is one of the most dynamic phases of any mission.
And the temperatures that a shuttle endures through all this, in excess of 2,000 degrees, correct? Fahrenheit?
I believe that's right.
And so clearly, the heat shield is something that is very important and has to be considered. Is there anything else you can tell us about? The term is telemetry. That's basically all those radio signals that feed all those computer screens in Houston. Is there anything in that telemetry that anybody has seen that showed any sorts of hiccups on any other systems that would give anybody any preliminary indications as to what might have been going wrong?
Miles, I was not in the control center this morning, so I can't tell you absolutely that nothing was noticed, but at present there's nothing that's leading us to any conclusions. There are two ways to determine the status of the vehicle during entry and landing, particularly over the continental United States. One of those is the telemetry that's sent from the vehicle to the ground, and the other is ground-based C-band radar tracking information. And unfortunately, we found ourselves in Houston without any indications either way.
Jeff Carr, United Space Alliance spokesperson, joining us from Houston. We appreciate it. We'd like to get back to you whenever you feel it's important. And
Miles, there is one important note I might add.
Go ahead.
And I very much appreciate your efforts to let folks in East Texas know that any debris that they might encounter out there could be hazardous. There are toxic chemicals aboard the vehicle at that phase of reentry, and as curious as they may be, it's important to their safety to report any debris that they might encounter to the local authorities and stay away from it.
Words to the wise. Please, if you're in earshot and you're in that part of the world, we implore you to listen to that, because that would just compound the tragedy that we're seeing unfold today. Jeff Carr, we'll check in with you in just a bit.